safe and safety procedures are followed in case of any emergency. When do you evacuate in case of emergency? As soon as you hear the instructions through our public address system, you will be requested to leave the building immediately by the nearest emergency exit door. In this room, we've got 8 emergency exit doors, which is enough for everyone to evacuate. We've got a green glass next to each door that you will be asked to break on your way out. And so those doors will lead to the emergency exit route, whereby you will be given instructions by the emergency fire marshals in those points. Important notice: please do not use the lift. All our lifts will be grounded in any case of emergency, and they will stay open. Be cautious, please do not run. Avoid causing delays, and please do not obstruct other evacuations. You are requested not to run, just walk slow, not too slowly, but we ask you not to run. And you are also requested to help those who cannot evacuate by themselves. But in that case, we've got an evacuation chair outside this room, which will be used to help those who cannot evacuate by themselves. We've got security officers and fire marshals that will help in those instances. But if you have left your belongings, do not return to take your bag. Surely, fire marshals will not allow you to do that. Maybe they can only allow you to do that if they don't like you. Do not re-enter the building until asked to do so by the emergency response team. Thank you and welcome to SABC.
Now, as indicated, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with the formal proceedings proper. We know that there's big business that we've got to deal with this morning. Let me extend warm words of welcome to all of you who are here this morning. And the lead person today is the Minister of Arts and Culture, Minister Nathi Mthethwa. We also have the Minister of Communications, Faith Mutambi, with us, who's going to also present later on in the day. We've got different representatives from academia, from civil society, from churches, and various other bodies, unions, and so forth, and including you and I, who take a keen interest in making sure that we fulfill the promise that is in the Constitution that says we have to build a non-racial, non-sexist society. So we are all discharging our responsibilities this morning as members of this beautiful nation. And without further ado, I am going to request that the anthem of the African Union be played, to be followed by the South African national anthem, and let's accord these anthems their due honor and respect. Thank you.
Let us all unite and celebrate together the victories won for our liberation. Let us dedicate ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa,
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think the agenda is already set in the anthems that we listened to and participated in. The commitments are being made there. United we shall stand, we shall strive for freedom, and so it goes. And of course, the whole point is that we have commitments and obligations to each other. And the Constitution of South Africa enjoins us to work on the aspiration of this nation, and that is to become a non-racial consensus people who are united in the quest for better quality of life for all, being mindful of the difficult and painful past of oppression. In other words, we will find it within ourselves to overcome the hurt and the damage of the past and create a new reality for ourselves against the conditions that went before. Now, this is how we're going to run the program today. As we know, this multi-stakeholder meeting is being held to discuss a roadmap towards building a front for nation building, social cohesion and reconciliation. It's been held under the auspices of the Arts and Culture Department, led by the Minister Nathi Mthethwa, who's going to give us the keynote address this morning, outlining the whole agenda. But there will be representatives from different stakeholders who have a keen interest in this subject and have got constructive inputs to make. And there are about 16 or so of them. They've each been allocated 10 minutes. Now, you may wonder what my business is here, is to play referee of sorts, besides directing the proceedings. Meaning, the key responsibility that I have to discharge this throughout the day is to make sure they stick to 10 minutes or less. So, if you see me taking them off stage, I've got a few bodyguards here. They're not wearing any uniform, but they're there. Who will help me take them off this podium if they go beyond the allocated time. And if I fail in my efforts, please assist me in making sure that they stick to the script. But be that as it may, we're also going to get a chance to make our own inputs from the floor, and thereafter we're going to summarize the discussions and then give you a presentation. Professor Somadoda Fikeni and Professor Sandton will do that for us towards the end of the day's proceedings. We'll have concluding remarks as well as the vote of thanks from Ministers Nathi Mthethwa and Minister Faith Mtambi. Does it sound like a plan? Is it a workable plan? Is it all right? Or you want me to change any part of it? You are okay with it as is? Huh? I've got only 1 minute to make changes. You are okay with it? Yeah. All right. So we are all going to respect it. Is that right? And that's how we're going to work this morning. So, Minister Nathi Mthethwa, everybody's happy with the way things are going to work this morning. So you are in good company. Everybody's looking forward to hearing your own submission and the speech that you are going to give us, helping us focus our minds appropriately on this big topic that is confronting our nation today. But we are people with agency. We know how to deal with our problems. We do it all the time. And it is one of those situations that we're willing to confront head on and deal with constructively. Minister of Arts and Culture, Minister Nathi Mthethwa, thank you.
Thank you, team, and good morning to everyone. Good morning. Sanbonani. Kuyamore.
Kuyamore.
Lochana. Dumelan. Chabela. Linda. Program Director, Mr. Timudise, my colleagues, ministers here present, Sub-Communications, Minister in the Presidency responsible for women, Deputy Minister of Justice, Constitutional Affairs, and Traditional Minister here with us. Speakers, panelists, and participants, representative and leader of social cohesion advocates, Judge Mporo, the leadership of cross-section of our society organizations drawn from different sectors, leaders of civil society organizations, the African royalty in attendance, leaders of labor movement, leaders of youth formation, leaders of women formations, representatives of the journalistic fraternity, representatives of the special interest groups, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, fellow compatriots. Accept my greetings on behalf of the South African government and indeed on behalf of the Interministerial Committee. Let me also add the words of welcome to this session, where we also welcome your anticipated and expected collective wisdom on the greatest challenges and historic mission of our generation. As we gather here today to reflect and creatively explore ways of advancing nation building, social cohesion, and reconciliation, we are immediately confronted with the truth that we are not where we were during that democratic moment of 1994, and yet we are not where we intended to be. In simple terms, much has changed, and yet so much remains unchanged, thus suggesting that there is much work before us. In 1994, South Africa made a giant leap forward from a deeply divided, conflict-ridden past, and the then regime and sections of our society have become pariahs of the world. In that painful past, this country witnessed institutionalized white domination expressed in various forms of violence and dispossession. Yes, indeed. We also witnessed white-on-white violence that culminated in the Anglo-Boer War, which in essence is a South African war, that also witnessed the introduction of some of the first cases of concentration camps in the world. During the Mfetane, we witnessed black African kingdoms and chiefdoms turn against each other. And missing in most of these master or grand narratives have been the story of the Khoi and the San communities that suffered numerous injustice and violence in the hand of Bantu and later on the relentless onslaught by colonial forces. It would be hard to imagine the hardships that Asian and African slaves suffered in the more recent history of the struggle against apartheid Sharpeville massacre on the 21st of May of March 1960 and the student rebellion of 1976. All the aforementioned conflicts are an accumulated residue or scars of our collective societal and our group memories. These inform our pain, guilt, hope, and fear. Such a wounded psychology defies any national aspirations contained in our national constitution and underlying laws. The more recent incidents of racism in the social media and some widespread incidents of racism or racial tension are a reminder of what this cross-section of leadership with us here today ought to decisively and creatively deal with. It is a painful reminder that we need to climb in our relentless quest to realize the promises of our democracy. Addressing similar situation faced by the citizens of the United States of America. Cornel West wrote, and I quote, "We simply cannot enter the 21st century at each other's throats, even as we acknowledge the weighty forces of racism, patriarchy, economic inequality, homophobia, and ecological abuse on our necks. We are at a crucial crossroad in the history of this nation, and we either hang together by combating these forces that divide and degrade us, or we hang separately." Close quote. He continues to pose the following question to his fellow compatriots: do we have the intelligence, humor, imagination, courage, tolerance, love, respect, and will to meet the challenge? Time will tell. None of us alone can save the nation or world, but each of us can make a positive difference if we commit ourselves to do so. Close quote. What we seek to address in this gathering today is deadly, is poisonous, is destructive. It feeds to every healthy cell of this country like wildfire, unless we take rapid, aggressive steps to exterminate it. What we are dealing with is a cancer. As we gather here today to prepare for the coming National Convention for Nation Building, Social Cohesion and Reconciliation, I'm reminded of profoundly insightful proclamation of Frantz Fanon in his book, The Rest of the Earth, when he declared, and I quote, "Each generation must out of obscurity discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it." Close quote. Our long history as a people of South Africa immediately reveals that different and successive cohorts of preceding generations have been able to identify their historic mission, and largely they have been able to fulfill it. Here I'm reminded of the national mobilization of a cross-section of society that culminated in 1955 with the adoption of the Freedom Charter as an alternative platform of the then apartheid system. In 1956, 60 years ago, we again witnessed women of this country rise against oppression in their march to the Union Building. In the early 1990s, leaders from diverse, sometimes enemies, political formations gathered to engage and craft a political future that ended apartheid system in its former legal sense and ushered in the new era of democracy in 1994. Again, we witnessed in our generation mobilization of South Africans in crafting of our national constitution that was adopted 20 years ago as a guiding beacon of light of our democracy. As we assemble here today, we are retracing the steps of those giants who defined and fulfilled their historic mission of their times. The greatest burden of history that we carry on our shoulders today is to ask, what is the historic mission of our time, and what are we practically doing to fulfill it? Failure to answer this fundamental question will tacitly imply that we have chosen to betray the mission. More than 2 decades of our young democracy, we have recently experienced political tensions on the subject of status and place names. We have also witnessed incidents of racial tension or conflict in our institutions of higher learning and in the farms. We are now reeling from a recent spate of racist incidents and utterances over the social media. While these incidents are important, and they are also important reminders of the social issues of our times, they should not make us lose focus of the bigger picture, hence the need to mobilize a new front or coalition for nation-building, social cohesion and reconciliation, not as an antidote to these recurring incidents, but also as a way of fulfilling the promises of our democracy as articulated in our Constitution. A gathering of this nature is a bold statement that government alone cannot resolve some of our age-old complex challenges. It is also a clear reminder that we should not always be fixated on asking what is government doing about social, economic, and political challenges of our time, but rather ask what can all of us do to break the spine of these social ills that are a menace to stability and advancement of our nascent democracy. I just want to express a cautionary note. South African elite is notorious for its love of conferences, workshops, and all kinds of meetings whose resolutions never see the light of the day or real implementation to solving the problems of masses of our people. And again, I'm reminded of that great African revolutionary and public intellectual, Amilcar Cabral, when he observed, and I quote, "Always bear in mind that people are not fighting for ideas, for things in anyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better, and in peace to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children," close quote. So what it means, ladies and gentlemen, is that we should be practical about the challenges we are faced with. We should also be ready to implement what we decide on. And this is a sharp reminder that no amount of abstract ideas will resolve our problems, and we must begin to focus on creative, practical, simple, accessible methods and solutions that will resonate with the masses of our people. We should have grounded practical strategies and impactful solutions informed and inspired by societal mobilization at different epochs of our struggle for justice. A requisite step is to acknowledge the fact that we may have diverse background and histories, but we have a shared country, and therefore a common destiny and future that we must positively influence and shape. I therefore appeal to each and every one of us, of all the sectors and leaders gathered here today, to transcend their sectional interest or partisan impulse for a greater, nobler objective of nation building and conciliation. Of course, we have to unpack the notion of reconciliation, as it presupposes that there was a conciliation before which didn't work, and there is a reconciliation. But our history suggests otherwise. Perhaps it can be argued that the initial undermining of the role of arts, culture, and heritage in favor of economic, political project of our democracy and nation building was a fundamentally flawed strategy, as we are now beginning to realize the compelling value of this sector in social cohesion, national identity, and conciliation. Arts, culture, and heritage constitute a DNA of any society, and once this genetic code of our society is weakened or destroyed, it then has profound implications for our political and economic well-being, especially when considering our history. I want to acknowledge some important work and interventions done by different sectors in our society, as well as the work that is currently being championed by social cohesion advocates that I met 2 weeks ago. This meeting is aimed at consolidating all these sometimes disparate and isolated efforts into a single social movement for a positive change and impact towards nation building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. In this meeting, I would like presenters and participants to reflect on the achievements since the advent of our democracy, some gaps and shortcomings that can be identified, and even more important, to focus on what needs to be done to advance and deepen our efforts in promoting nation building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. As we are in a consultative and informative session, we are also preparing for the National Convention on this subject, and we shall encourage guidance on the issue of how to develop an effective, broad front of forces of positive change, as well as clearly articulated program and goals for the National Convention. I urge you to begin to craft the framework of a social compact that the coming convention shall reflect and adopt as the roadmap and a covenant of our society. Perhaps it is important to start from this side and to be practical about how we seek to go forward. As we draw to the conclusion, I would like to propose the following for our practical consideration. One is that we develop strategies that should be deployed for maximum mobilization of all sectors of society to fight the demon of racism wherever it manifests itself. So the first point is that when such intolerances manifest themselves, all of us must take a stand, as our hashtag says, not in my name, we reject racism. If it's sexism, we reject sexism. If it's xenophobia, we reject xenophobia. But having rejected, we need to move beyond it. We need to explore, as the second point, we need to explore mechanisms of mass socialization and education that foster multicultural consciousness in order to celebrate our diversity in a united South Africa. This can be done through what the social cohesion advocates already are involved in: community conversations and sectoral conversations. Thirdly, whilst we cannot regulate racial attitudes that individual or groups hold, but a regulatory framework should be in place to fill the gap, particularly regulate behavior and become a deterrent of would-be racist. Because on this point is that people go out of their way, hurt and harm others. When the pressure mounts on them, they just say sorry. And you don't even know whether this sorry is genuine or it's because pressure has been bearing on them. The fourth area is that if we are going to reach our end point that is coming up with the social compact as we convene the National Convention, we should have unifying perspectives as South Africa. We should have these values where we say, this is us as South Africa, and if you define yourself outside of these values, you are not one of us. It is against that backdrop that we need to make a firm proposal for the popularization and the usage of moral regeneration movement charter for positive value as this unifying perspective for nation building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. Those would be some of the things we need to look into as we move forward. The founders of our democracy, in their various articulations, always cautioned us that in tackling the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, the road will not be easy, and progress must never be assumed as an inevitable natural step. And they also warned that there would be setbacks in the process. In other words, their warning was very simple, that the road to social progress is always under construction. What they always amplified was that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance in upholding and striving for a vision and values contained in our Constitution. On this occasion, I appeal to you as leaders of our various communities and constituencies to spare no effort in working towards the success of the planned National Convention and in guiding this meeting through your participation. On our side as government, particularly the Interministerial Committee on Nation Building and Social Cohesion, will do all what we can to provide support and creating space for your constructive engagement. Because out of this, we have an idea that all of us from our different sectors would be able to have our own summits and meetings preparing for the convention so that we are able to come back to the convention and deal with issues having prepared. We see this not as an event, the National Convention itself, but as a process. A process which we say at the end of the day, as a religious sector or faith-based sector, what is our role in nation building? As the private sector, what is our role? As traditional leaders, as youth, as women, and so on, we should be able to identify our role in that regard. The closing words of our global icon, Tata Madiba, in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, are instructive, as he said, and I quote, "I have walked a long walk to freedom. But I discovered that after climbing a great hill, one finds that there are many more hills to climb. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I cannot linger, for my walk is not yet ended." So as we walk towards our national convention, we must be reminded of our responsibilities as this broad front for positive change. As we walk beyond the national convention as active citizens, we must always be reminded of huge responsibilities that freedom has bestowed on us as this current cohort of leaders. We dare not fail, as we would be dishonoring those who fought for this freedom and made ultimate sacrifices. And even more important, we shall be imposing this burden of history and responsibilities on the young generation and generations yet to be born. Let us all stand up and be counted as those who put their shoulders on the wagon of nation building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. Together we can do more, but divided will always fall short of assisting this great society realize its true potential. In conclusion, we are reminded of what Madiba said on this matter. It is not our diversity which divides us. It is not our ethnicity or religion or culture that divides us. Since we have achieved our freedom, there can only be one division amongst us. Between those who cherish freedom and democracy, and those who do not. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister Mthethwa, for reminding us of what the Constitution requires us to do, and of course we volunteered our time for those who are here this morning because we share the same vision, that this is a society we want to craft, and the rationale behind the fight and the struggle for freedom was exactly that let's have a democratic, free, non-racial South Africa, and let us not allow it to go asunder on our watch. And let me extend greetings to the ministers, deputy ministers, traditional leaders, various other leaders that I did not extend greetings to. You're all welcome. And please participate. You know, the whole story takes place these days in social media. So go there to make your commentary as we go along. Not in my name is the hashtag, and also is it the handle, I think it's called, at Arts Culture SA. So as the speakers come here to make their submissions, you can also add your own views there so that we engage fellow South Africans and other people around the world who may be interested in the proceedings. So let me call on the speakers in this order. Professor Mushinkondo, please come forward. And Ms. Luli Kalin-Nikos, also come and take your seat, ma'am. There in front. All right? Because I want us to move time, you see. That's why I'm doing this. And then, as you do that, I'm going to call on Judge Yvonne Mokoro to come forward and be our first speaker after the minister. Speaking for social cohesion advocate. Now, I'm going to face my first test. My first test today is against the judge of the Constitutional Court, for that matter. I don't know if you are within the constitutional rights and what protocol says. If a constitutional judge a judge of the Constitutional Court oversteps the mark. I've said 10 minutes. If she goes beyond 10 minutes, I don't know where the appeal is going to go. I'll just appeal to the masses of our people to assist me and that regard. The Honorable Judge, please. Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much, Tim. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ministers, leaders of communities, everybody who is here, friends. Thank you for this opportunity. Tim, there's always a question which people think is a difficult question to answer when it is asked. The judges judge, but who judges the judges? Very easy. Tim is here today to judge the judges. So I don't think it's such a difficult question. Thank you for the opportunity, Minister, to speak today for 10 minutes, as Tim indicated, just to give the gathering an idea what we, as advocates of social cohesion and nation building, have come up with as our contribution towards this pact that we are preparing for, the convention that we are preparing for. And as the Minister already said, we take our cue from the Constitution. In everything we do as South Africans, we consider the Constitution first, because it is a Constitution which created and envisions for us as South Africans a united South Africa, where we are united in our diversity, the need for us to create a democracy which is non-sexist, which is non-racial, where all of us are equal before the law and we respect, each and every one of us, the human dignity of each and every one of us. In other words, the Constitution envisions a democracy where we as citizens not only enjoy the rights to be citizens, and be protected in terms of our constitution. And we also have a duty as citizens to create that democracy, strengthen that democracy by respecting at least the human dignity of each and every citizen and all of those who live in South Africa. So the Constitution envisions a society for us and provides that we as citizens must build that society. Since 1994, we know that the state itself has made efforts through government to create an environment through a number of activities, including cabinet Lokotas, policy, programs, to create an environment where the citizens themselves may have an opportunity to participate in social cohesion and nation building. First of all, we know that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started a process through the TRC process, but it just opened the opportunity for us as citizens, as a nation, to take the idea of reconciliation and nation building forward. So that when a group of advocates of social cohesion were appointed by the President and were given the role and function to drive through the Department of Arts and Culture's assistance and guidance, a program of social cohesion and nation building. We took that seriously. We have been working since 2012, since the summit in Kliptown, to put together a program of action, because we recognize that social cohesion and nation building must be systematically pursued in order to achieve what the Constitution envisions. And it was also recognized by the appointment of these advocates of social cohesion that social cohesion and nation building cannot be achieved, as the Minister said, as Tim also indicated, by the state through government alone. It is essentially a program that needs to be posited within society. In other words, it needs to be pursued and worked upon by society, all sectors of society, including right down within communities, starting, of course, with families. We envisage a situation where each family will ask itself, what is our role as a family in creating this united nation of South Africans, in promoting social cohesion and nation building? As an individual, what is my role as an individual to pursue that program and achieve the agenda that the Constitution has placed for us? So the advocates of social cohesion have come up with a practical plan of action, starting with community conversations, which it is hoped would inform the conceptualization of ideas, because we have realized that it is important in order to pursue social cohesion and nation building, to hear what communities themselves understand by social cohesion and nation building, and what communities themselves would wish to see is taken into account to achieve and realize social cohesion and nation building. We have put a program which will require us to engage with the various sectors of society, right from academics to communities, public sector, private sector. Work together in partnership, engage in parallel programs where community and sectoral views inform the thinking which need further to inform our actions. And as we go about having these conversations with communities, with the various sectors, it is important that we form partnerships, practical, action-oriented partnerships. We need to be systematic in the way we pursue nation-building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. We cannot continue to be reactionary and also only start conversations when there are issues which flare up within our society. Those will continue to happen, but we must also be ready to respond to those issues as they come up time and again. And we'll be ready to respond to them in unison if we have, at a practical level, brought society together in pursuit of that society that our Constitution envisions for all of us. And it is for that reason that we urge all sectors, we urge all levels of our society to answer to the call of advocates of social cohesion when we engage in meetings, fora, and come to you to require your assistance or your partnership in one or other function that we will engage in pursuit of our program of action. The media in particular is urged to see itself as a formidable partner. The youth, through their various formations, women's groups through their various formations, men's groups through their various formations, all sectors of society, traditional leaders. We will come to you with proposals, we will ask you to assist us and work together in pursuit of the program of action that we have put together. In the end, it is envisaged that society will, at some stage, find systematic ways of working together towards a program of social action which will definitely not be an event. We are doing this probably not to succeed and finally see us come together in our lifetime, but we are doing it mostly as a legacy for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children. We're doing it for South Africa, and nobody but us South Africans can do it and must do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Yvonne Mokoro, there for your submission. Let me take this opportunity to remind all of us who are in the room that, as we heard even from the Minister, there have been a variety of actions taken over time to bring us to where we are. A democratic system that we enjoy today, and this is the anniversary of the march by women against past laws and apartheid 60 years ago. And one of the stalwarts, the leaders of that then protest action, is still with us here today, 60 years down the line. Ms. Sophie de Brain, if you could please rise. Let's acknowledge you. I'm introducing her so that during her own lifetime, she should see that we are not taking what you strove for granted. When things go wrong, we will try and correct them, because that's exactly what you were marching against at that time, that which seems to be fracturing us as a society today. And proactively, we're trying to make sure that we fulfill the promise that is enshrined and that you and your colleagues then, 60 years ago, marched for. So we're very proud that you're still with us here today and to participate in these deliberations. Much appreciated. Professor Moshe Kondo, Prof, you and I are good friends. So I was very strict with the Constitutional Court judge, the former Constitutional Court. So a professor should understand it much better. If you can indulge students, you can indulge me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, team. Thanks very much. 10 minutes. We'll run out pretty soon. Let me start off by once again commending our minister for focusing our energies on the centrality of the sector in the complex business of the state. You are doing it, sir, in a deliberate and very simple manner. We really appreciate it. It shows, among other things, the confidence we have as a people in government, in spite of its imperfections. We are here within the framework of our laws and principles. Laws and principles that our government designed. We are not breaking up into massive disobedience. And that's a sign of public confidence and trust. I'll talk about that later. Our efforts to mobilize a national front to deal with the triple challenges must focus on their ideological origins, the political, social, and economic circumstances surrounding them, and the capacity of the policy instruments. Those are the three aspects of work. The history, Honorable Minister, of anti-colonial struggles in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Angola, the Cape Verde Islands, Algeria, to mention all the most prominent, has been marked by a period of violent upheavals against the prevailing system of political, legal, cultural, and social relations which have been overthrown and replaced by a new one. There is, Honorable Minister, as you know, there is by no means a perfect symmetry in these periods of great historical change. Yet there are certain patterns, certain regularities. Each has brought about a fundamental change, a lasting change in the social system as a whole. Each has sought legitimacy in a fundamental law, a radically different future. Each took more than one generation to establish roots. Each eventually produced a new legal system which embodies some of the major goals of the liberation struggle and which changed the colonial legal tradition, but which for very complex reasons, which we may start to look at, but which ultimately, Honorable Minister, remain within that tradition. These liberation struggles, including our own, led by the African National Congress, involves not only the creation of new form of government, but also new structures of social and equal relations between the state and society, new conceptions of the individual and the community, as well as new perspectives of history and the possibilities of life. They also involve the creation of new sets of universal values. In South Africa, the African National Congress and its alliance partners set in motion forces that resulted in the Bill of Rights, setting in motion the sharp increase in political consciousness, political participation, and commitment to egalitarian values. But why is it, Honorable Minister and colleagues, why is it that new liberalism is so triumphant here and around the world? It is so far. Why is it? Why is it so resilient? Why is it so adaptive? Why is it that all the countries that achieved independence through a political settlement have had no much difficulty resolving the land question? Why is it that all these legal systems, that in all these legal systems, political liberties are unconditional, but socio-economic ones conditioned? Why? To respond, Minister, to these questions, we need to deconstruct a global and overly harmonious understanding of neoliberal hegemony in favor of an approach that seeks to identify hegemonic constellations in each country, although globalization ensures important overlaps. But there are national identities. That way we may shed light in our society, Minister, on a wide range of actors, networks, organizations, social forces, discourses, and processes which are crucial for understanding neoliberal practices in institutions, organizations, universities, associations. We need to understand also how larger political and economic structures are connected to social relations in the realm of knowledge, in the realm of discourses, ideas, and interpretation. We need to understand also how these structures penetrate perceptions, penetrate intuitions, feelings, desires, appetites, attitudes, and behaviors. Consequently, one of our critical tasks, Honorable Minister, is to offer a detailed assessment of the different roles of neoliberal planners and strategists who meet around the world in our own society in the creation and dissemination of neoliberal ideas and practices and how they connect to other collective actors, networks, channels of communication and organization that occupy critical positions in various political arenas beyond the narrow sphere of the state. So in the liberal democracy, is fundamental change possible? This question is now being raised internationally by the left, let alone rapid change. Honorable Minister, there are those in this country and in the world who see the ballot paper as a death to revolution, to rapid fundamental change, seeing formal democratization as decreasing the channels for radical change by channeling discontent into legal arenas. Where we come from a classic age of revolution, storming the Bastille from outside, but now the revolution must occur within the discipline of the law. It doesn't mean a shift in strategies and tactics. On the other hand, some argue that the forces for fundamental change might take the form of mass civil disobedience, as they did in Iran, and as they did here in the late 80s and the 90s. That hasn't happened again in this country, and that endorses my perception. There's still tremendous public trust and confidence in our government. And here is where the National Front might come in. It will entail mobilizing communities to engage directly in setting their own agendas, independent of global neoliberal frameworks. But this will entail also practical mechanisms to educate civil society through a Gramscian war of position. This assumes that the age of armed struggle, of basic and violent transformation of the state and its class structures is over. But in our country, there are at least 3 constitutional constraints. And I got them from the statement by the first Chief Justice. 1, recognition of the right to land usurped during the wars of dispossession and recognized by international law. 2, a conditionality of social rights in a society divided by severe inequalities. 3, questions with the potential to disrupt the political order are decided finally by the courts and not by the people's parliament. Is it possible in the present conjuncture to escape from the constraints imposed by the neoliberal political and economic order? First, the state must augment its capacity. The struggle is long. We won't solve these problems in an administrative manner. We won't. Anyway, I think it's important for us to indicate the 3 things that we've done. First, because the state has the legitimate authority to do this. The state must augment its capacity to mobilize resources for fundamental change. Second, it should assist the labor movement to extend political democracy to the workplace and the market. There's an urgent need for technical democracy. But as we do this, Minister, we should acknowledge the importance of knowledge and cultural institutions going forward. So far, the crucial role of these institutions, of the National Library, the National Archives, the Freedom Park, the National Arts Council, these institutions that produce, preserve knowledge that comprehends our future, these institutions are underrated and therefore underfunded. There's going to be no future unless we give more prominence to knowledge. Thank you.
Professor Kondo, thank you very much. But I'll tell you, I come adequately prepared. I have been made to pay particular attention to the histories of revolutionaries. They are known to go on and on. From the likes of Fidel Castro. So I was not sure whether you might continue the whole day and you may be sitting here until tomorrow, because I promised you that we are going to break for lunch at some point and certain things are going to happen. And then they will wonder that when do they get to hear the other speakers and also get to their lunch? I'm sure that is a concern that that they will check. But nevertheless, thanks very much for the presentation there. Let me call on Mpumelelo Mkhabela to please occupy the seat, the Prof and the Judge. You may go back to your seats, thank you. And call on Zwandile Molo of the South African Council of Churches, the Reverend. Please come and take the seat here. Whilst we do the work. Oh, there we go. All right, Mr. Yashin Pillay of the National Youth Development Agency, please come forward. Oh, before you come, sorry, let me just pause you there. Rather call Ms. Luli Kalinikos to come forward, and then Yashin, you take the seat over there. All right, Luli Pillay. Luli Kalinikos, a better part, and Yashin Pillay, go over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm trembling here, and I'm just trying to see how I'm going to prune my offering to 10 minutes. And so I think I'd better be quick, just talk a little faster and cut out quite a bit. And I'm also very grateful that Professor Mkondo has sketched the outline of the political economy of South Africa, and of course the Minister has given us an outline of our dark colonial history. And of course there wasn't conciliation ever. And so we've got to rethink this idea of reconciliation and bear it in mind, the contradiction of the word. But what I wanted to talk about just very quickly was, because I'm going to cut it, the ideas around non-racialism, and always with non-racialism, there was its partner, the other side of the coin, which was nationalism, whether it was Afrikaner nationalism or more significantly, black consciousness. And the two were always kind of there. The one was forward, the other was lurking in the background. Then when it turned around, the other, non-racialism, was lurking in the background. But the interesting thing is that our intellectuals who were crafting these approaches to society were outside of the university. They were intellectuals who were activists. The founding of the ANC, bringing together all Africans. The Marxists who emerged following both before and after the Bolshevik Revolution, foregrounding social structure, foregrounding structure, but also the economy. And some of them were saying that race doesn't exist scientifically. It doesn't exist. I'm thinking of Neville Alexander, for example, who said it's a social construct. So it doesn't exist. Let's just look at the economy, who are the poor, who are the rich, and why. Nevertheless, there were others, like the Communist Party, who developed the idea of the national question. And, of course, the reason why we are here today is that the national question is not resolved. We still don't have a nation. We didn't have a nation, and we're working towards it. We've made, of course, exciting and inspiring progress in the last 22 years. And of course, there were heroic struggles and inspiring struggles in the past, and we have to acknowledge those as well. But it's only recently, and then of course there was also the worker struggles as well, but it's only recently that academics and intellectuals attached to the academe who've been looking really seriously at issues like non-racialism. It was our forefathers and mothers were activists who actually acted out some of those issues around race. I think I was going to talk about various intellectuals who've written interesting books. But I think to save time, I'm going to focus on one very recent book. It's called The Color of Our Future. Does Race Matter in Post-Apartheid South Africa? And it's edited by Kolela Manku, Professor Kolela Manku. And I think it has a number of interesting authors who've contributed to it. And he himself, of course, comes from a black consciousness background, wrote the biography of Sandton. And he actually raises the question about non-racialism. It's a sort of non-thing, it's just like a blur, who is a non-racist? What does a non-racist actually look like in society? And interestingly, another thinker who is very influential and highly respected is Joe Netshitenze. And he also addresses the issue of non-racialism. And he too says, we've got a festival of negatives here. Non-racism, non-sexism, non-this, anti-that. And but at the same time, traces the history of the Freedom Charter, the Morogoro statement in exile, a strategy and tactics statement, where the Morogoro statement tries to refine the criticism of the Freedom Charter, which says the land belongs to all who live in it. The Morogoro strategy and tactics document says liberation must come to all, but all, and, if you like, Africans in particular, we know the phrase because we have it today, and blacks in general. So it refines it, and in a way it kind of embraces both sides, you know, the non-racial thread and the, perhaps, you know, partly the black consciousness thread. So, you know, it looks as if we are, in a way, starting to come together. And Professor Manku also talks about Steve Biko's notion, where he says, we've got such a diverse country here, and it's always going to be diverse because for historical reasons that's what we are today. And he proposes a joint culture, that Steve Biko's phrase, which is still very relevant today, a joint culture, he says, but which naturally the majority of the people will have more influence on that joint culture, and others will fit in. He also quotes Robert Sobukwe, who talks about it's not the color of your skin, it's whether you are committed to Africa and to the country. Then you are an African. Joe Nchitenze, eventually after this discussion, talks about three seminal thinkers, intellectuals of the 20th century. He mentions Dr. Pixlika Isaka Seme, who in 1904 gave that beautiful seminal speech, I am an African, which has inspired people since then. And Sene says, Africa has got something to teach the world, and it's going to come. Then Nchitenze also quotes Chief Albert Luthuli in his Nobel Peace Prize speech, who said something very similar. He said that I believe that Africa is going to bring a gift, and talks about the human syntheses, plural, of Egypt, China, Europe, and Africa, which will bring a spiritual, a moral, and a humanist order as a gift to the world. And then finally, Joe Nchitenze also quotes Steve Biko, who says, we are working, Black consciousness is working to offer the world, or to show the world, a human face. Now that is a very powerful reply, if you like, to neoliberalism, to this rapacious greed for consumerism, for consumer culture. And what we need to do, I think, is to put forward these very inspiring ideas, which are part of our our very foundation. One of the books that I also wanted to quote, and I'll just do it very is Jacob Dlamini's Native Nostalgia. I found this interesting because it's a story not of the big people up there, the big thinkers. It's a story about his childhood in a township and how the neighborhood managed. It's a history from below, and I'm a social historian, so it really appeals to me, of ordinary people. Njabulu Ndebele, Professor Njabulu Ndebele once talked about the ordinary. Let us think about the ordinary, and Judge Mokoro has said, let us talk to the ordinary people. They are the ones that feel the problems most keenly. And, he's got stories of how neighbors would help each other, a kind of strategy of survival, but it's a collective and a shared one. And so it's that, I think. And what I would like to do is to encourage academics to start looking at our own deeply embedded culture, which is difficult to grasp intellectually, but the culture of humanism, or Ubuntu, if you like. There's one book that's come out. My problem with it is that there are not enough writers who have lived Ubuntu. There are people looking at it from above. And so I'm hoping that we could get together with social academics and intellectuals and start looking at our very own African culture and see how far this can take us in our quest for a united, if diverse nation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Luli Kalinikos. You probably wonder why I'm hovering around, Luli. Well, it's the neoliberals who are telling me that, look, you said 10 minutes, and you better stick to 10 minutes, and otherwise, you know how it works. All right, well, again, we're going to have a long day, ladies and gentlemen, and I just want us to make sure that, around 5:30, at least the proceedings are done. We have additional 12 more submissions before we break. So that's the whole point. I'm working against that. Please understand. All right? I'm not trying to interfere with the proceedings or anything of that sort. It's just that we've got to get going. Otherwise, we will end up with a major problem on our hands later on. And Mr. Yasin Pillay from the National Youth Development Agency, please come forward. It doesn't change, it remains 10 minutes. If you can, as representative of the youth, you can even edit yourself to 7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Program Director. And I think the group as young people will try to be disciplined, but critical. As honorable ministers, deputy ministers, distinguished guests, comrades and friends. Well, as the National Youth Development Agency, or NYDA, we must firstly commend Minister Nathi Mthethwa for organizing this very important consultative meeting to discuss a broad front for nation building, social cohesion and reconciliation. In every society, there are laws which constitute the legal system, and then there are the values and principles which underpin the culture of the society. And let me start in a youthful manner and be as controversial as possible for the purposes of debate. The judgment of the High Court in favor of Mr. Cliff recently, being reinstated as a judge on the Idol show, may have been a legal victory for Mr. Cliff, but his action from the show for condoning racism was, for some, a moral victory for England.
And one must salute Mnet as a media house for taking the right decision, although it has been found by our courts to be an unlawful one. But an unlawful decision does not necessarily mean that the decision by Mnet was morally wrong. And I'm quite confident that Mnet will continue to grow and prosper for taking the right decision by standing firm against condonement of racism. A legal victory for Mr. Cliff, but a moral victory for Mnet. The mass condemnation of recent racist outbursts by a few in society and the actions taken by corporates such as Mnet, by young people in mass protests, by old and young, reflect a society that has really embraced a zero-tolerance approach to racism. Religion and science agree that there is only one race, and that is the human race. And there are no other races. In fact, there is no biological basis for categories of race except to say that it is a political and social construct in terms of which power, wealth, and social position can be assigned to. And ultimately, there is only one nation, and that is the nation of humanity. We therefore need to educate more about human values, and so we need more education in human values, especially for our young people who must be taught from a very early age that in fact we are all the same. And so we need to promote and live education in human values. We need to build a more humane society. And so the construction of a more humane society requires an adequate balance of unity in dialogue and unity in action. Unity in action is cultivated through non-racialism in action. And given our dark and racially divided past as a country, what we need is unity in action and unity in dialogue. We need non-racialism in action, not only in thought. And so we need to practice non-racialism in every thought, in every word, and in every action. But what is interesting in the discourse around race and race relations today is that the loudest ones are not necessarily the youngest ones. And in a country where 42% of the population are youth, this poses a significant challenge to what we seek to achieve. The loudest and most controversial seem to be the pre-1994 adults with a lot of baggage from the past. The post-1994 youth are not being given enough space to share their own views, their own experiences and thoughts about growing up in a democratic and multiracial society. In fact, the youth of today may have more to teach us about race and race relations than we think. And so let us promote the voices of youth on matters of race and social cohesion. There can be no roadmap without the important voice of the youth. As the NYDA, we will be leading the creation in partnership with the Department of Arts and Culture for more platforms and programs aimed at actively involving the youth in efforts of nation building and social cohesion. From education to sport, the NYDA, together with the Department of Arts and Culture, will develop youth-orientated programs aimed at promoting an educated, more empowered, non-racist, non-sexist, and prosperous youth. We have intensified youth development programs which seem to be promoting social cohesion better than others. Programs such as a youth-built infrastructure development program, where young people are building houses for the poor and for other youth. And as they build together, they learn more about each other and valuable life skills. And one of the NYD Youth Build sites that has been identified for implementation this year, as per the instruction of President Zuma, will be right in the middle of two communities of Yesteris and Mamelodi, for example. And that's just like one example of the many planned sites, of the many programs that have been identified across the country to facilitate the involvement of young people in this very important discussion. Racism today manifests itself on social media, sport, music, business, etc. No stone must be left untouched as we fight the war against racism. And the destructive language of racists promoting a racist South Africa must be met with the progressive language of humanists promoting a more humane South Africa. South Africa should in fact be a world leader against racism and all forms of discrimination. And we must condemn all forms of discrimination and promote our unity and diversity. We in fact stand more to gain as a country by harnessing the power and strength of our diversity than by emphasizing our illusionary differences. Finally, in an interview conducted in 1968, Dr. Yusuf Dadoo, the then chairperson of the South African Communist Party and stalwart of the liberation struggle, was asked the question: the argument has been put to the Indian people in South Africa that as a minority group they will be no better off under black rule than under white rule. What is your answer to this argument? In his response, Dr. Dadoo is quoted as saying, "Freedom is indivisible. A section of the population cannot be free if the rest is in bondage." The argument of Asian provocateurs in our midst who deliberately try to provoke hostility in order to convince each of the other race groups that their grievances are not the fault of an oppressive government or system, but of another oppressed group. They use this tactic precisely because it is our unity in the face of oppression that the oppressor most fears. It is precisely our unity in the face of poverty, inequality, and unemployment that the oppressive system most fears. It is precisely our unity in diversity that will liberate us from political, economic, and social hardship. It is precisely our unity that is key to South Africa becoming a truly peaceful and prosperous country. And Program Director, Minister, and distinguished guests, as the NYDA, we are committed to facilitating the youth, or the unity of all youth in particular, and society at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yashas Bile of the NYDA. I'm now going to call on the editor of Sowetan newspaper, also executive member of SANEF, Mr. Mpumelelo Kabelo, to come forward.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Minister, for inviting SANEF. And good morning to everyone here. From where we sit as the media, of course, we often fight with the minister and the government and other people. But we appreciate the fact that we can sit around the table and participate in conversations such as this one to build our country. But I want to start off by perhaps raising a question: why we need to ask ourselves, why do we have to have nation building? Why do we have to have social cohesion? Why is it important for us? I mean, if we don't start there, we can argue and debate the whole day or have all kinds of strategies, but if we don't know why we're doing it, we may be lost, in my opinion. There are many reasons for this, and many other countries have undergone similar processes of nation building. But as South Africans, we need to understand that, among other reasons, I think are the following. One, nation building is important for building a strong state. I don't think we can find a strong state anywhere in the world. I mean, a strong state which is also legitimate anywhere in the world, where there is no social cohesion, no nation building. Two, I think it's important for even the sovereignty of the state itself. It's not just about the racial incidents that we speak about from time to time, the racial insults, the slurs, the undermining of each other, the tribalism that we find in some communities, the xenophobia. There's also the question of sovereignty. If we are not a united country that respects certain rules, certain norms around which we are united, certain traditions, it's easy for us to lose our sovereignty. I'll make an example. I think it's easy for a country to suffer from attacks, either internally or externally, if it's not a united country. If you have, for example, to design a security strategy for a country, it's not just about the military hardware, it's also about the software. The software is nation building, social cohesion. If people are not united, they're not loyal to the country, they're not loyal to the flag, they're not loyal to the constitution, they're not loyal to its traditions and norms and the values that should actually be uniting us. It's easy for people to let their guard down, and it's easy for them to lose even the freedoms that they've recently acquired. It's important that we have the nation building. I think there was an attempt in the beginning, at the dawn of this democracy, to actually elevate nation building as one of the central goals or central themes of the government. But somehow, I must say that my criticism is that this was actually dropped along the way. Many would remember that the government of President Nelson Mandela adopted the Reconstruction and Development Program, the RDP. It had 6 pillars. One of those pillars was nation building. My own newspaper, the Sowetan newspaper, had for years, long before 94, promoted the idea of nation building. And at some point down the line, my predecessors dropped the slogan nation building, which was a slogan that was the editorial philosophy of the newspaper. The slogan was also dropped from the front page of the newspaper. The government also dropped nation building as one of the 6 pillars, because we thought that we had arrived. We thought that with 1994 and now we had to formulate a new strategy to grow the economy, we had to have gear. We became more obsessed with the material side of things and forgot that actually not everybody had bought the idea of reconciliation. Not everybody understood that we had to go beyond adopting the constitution, we had to go beyond voting, we had to go beyond the procedural means of attaining a democracy and go to the hardcore issues, which is about social cohesion and nation building. We were woken up by this flaring up of xenophobia and this continued racial tension in the country, to realize that actually the job was not done. I think we were very naive to think that we could actually have realized the goals of nation building in such a short space of time. Nation building is a permanent project. You can go to America now, one of the oldest democracies. You can see what happens on the ground with racial tension from time to time, whether you look at the Ferguson attacks and many other incidents in the US. In Europe, Europe has somehow become like a hive for conservatives and extremist groups of all kinds, which shows that nation building should be a permanent thing. We can't erase it. We have to commend the Minister Mthethwa for bringing this back to the agenda and for actually making it the role of everyone to participate, whether it's business, the media, and everybody else. So I think that the nation building, the lowering of the guard and dropping nation building as one of the key pillars, or at least not highlighting as it should have been highlighted. It's actually one of the examples of our failures as a country, I think. There are a lot of good things that we develop, but we somehow drop them before they even reach maturity. Take, for example, after the nation building, the RTP, or as part of the RTP, there was a very beautiful concept that the government came up with, which was involving a lot of communities. Masakan. I'm not sure whether you remember Masakan. It was a big initiative of the government involving all sectors of society from the ground to say we must build each other. What happened? After that, the biggest initiative that the government came up with, which I still think is a beautiful policy, it's there, it's still a government policy. People talk about it, you go to government offices, you find it in the walls, it's there. It's supposed to be the moral code for civil servants, but it doesn't really find expression as it should. This is the third one, which is what to be, putting people first. But behind nation building, massacre, but to be, there's the social contract, which is the constitution. How many people talk about the constitution? People talk about it only when their rights are affected. When it's not their rights, who cares? I'll think about it later. I'm not affected, I'm not involved, it's not my business. It's only when the government didn't deliver a house to me that I go to the court to complain that my rights have not been fulfilled. But when the other person was actually demanding a clinic next door, I didn't care because it didn't affect me. Now that I need a house, now that I've been relocated from my land, I want to fight, I'm invoking the Constitution. We must invoke it even when it doesn't affect us. That's when it will actually gain true meaning. Now, before Timo decides to chase me here, I'm just reflecting on this thing as in the spirit of participation and in responding to what my other participants have said. But then we come to the role of the media, how we can contribute to this goal of nation building. The Constitution, Section 16, specifically refers to the rights of the press and other media. And there's a reason why the Constitution actually has the media there. The drafters of the Constitution could have avoided the media, but I think there's a recognition that the media plays a specific role in any society. And that role is not just to inform, educate, entertain, as we normally say we do, but the media can also play the role of being an agent of change. We have to be able to contribute to socialization of society. I think big contribution we can make there. How we can make people socialize themselves in certain ways. There are many institutions in society that play the role of socialization. The family being the primary source of socialization. And then we've got churches, we've got schools. But the media is also there as one of the role players. So we take our roles very seriously in that regard. Not only do we wish to highlight the bad in society, but we also want to highlight the good in society. We should be able to get people to understand the better side of themselves. And it plays the role of socialization in a sense that when you realize the other person is doing good for the community, and that is reflected in the media, and it's celebrated, people tend to copy. The media is a big institution that teaches people to copy other people. A lot of stuff is reflected in the media, people tend to emulate it. Unfortunately, even in instances where we publish bad things as a way of warning society, and people tend to take that differently and want to socialize themselves in that way. So that's another way of wanting to say we should educate our people to understand the role of the media. I think that if we go back to the question of nation building as one of the anchors of our electoral philosophy, at least for ourselves as the Sowetan, I think it would be a good idea. I've been championing this idea for some time now to say, guys, let's go back to our roots. The nation has not been built as we thought it has been. The journey is far, we're still far away, and we should make it a permanent thing. So that's one of the things we're debating in my newsroom, to say, why don't we bring back this idea of nation building as one of the editorial philosophies in our newsrooms? I think that another way of looking at the role of the media is to actually acknowledge that the media itself is evolving. Most of you picked up this recent incident of Sparrow and other people, not from traditional media, that is newspapers and television and radio. You probably picked it up from digital media, social media, and other platforms. And these media are not regulated, and I'm not saying we should regulate them. We want to express ourselves as freely as possible. But it's only when citizens are fully informed and fully educated and fully conscious and are aware of their responsibilities, not just their rights, of their responsibilities in nation building, that even when an institution like social media is widely open for people to say anything, they will actually say things that are responsible in social media. You can have all kinds of platforms and give people all kinds of freedoms and all of that, and we will celebrate them. But if they're not taught, if they're not conscientized about their roles as citizens, we're actually wasting our time. People will even advocate that these platforms should be closed. I've heard other people saying, let's regulate social media. I don't think it's a good idea. If you're going to regulate and close off all the spaces where people want to converse, you literally close off everything. There will be nothing, people won't be able to say anything. So, and the only way we can protect that space is to teach people to be responsible so that we don't find people calling for shutting down platforms for people to express themselves. Let's rather teach ourselves to be very responsible citizens wherever we are. And in that way protect the space where we operate. We had an incident recently where one of the journalists got involved in one of these racial incidents, and I was asked as a chairman of SABC to comment. And I actually said, we don't condone this, we actually condemn it. Because we believe that it's only when we recognize the limits to freedom of speech that our campaign for freedom of speech gain legitimacy. If you only want to champion your rights and you forget the limits, you look like you are self-serving. You want to express yourself, but you don't want limitations. You want your rights, but you don't want your responsibilities. Tim is here. So as a media, we commit ourselves to nation building by providing ourselves as a platform for social change, platform for debate, platform for information, and of course, platform for responsible conduct in society as a socialization agent of society. Thank you, Tim.
That was a good cue for me, Madam Kamela, when you said, the rights are there, but there are limitations. So I thought, well, let's test those limitations and see if they work. And those who have legal training in this room will know that it's not easy to prove that there are indeed limitations and they can be imposed on the rights. It's a struggle first, but nevertheless, thank you for the submissions and presentation. Now, talking about what the media can and should do, entertaining and so forth, I'm thinking of all the reality TVs, the Kardashians as an example of media's contribution to nation building and social cohesion, or our perfect wedding as one such. I think one of the problems we face as a nation is that there was a time when we left it to Mafana and the Springboks, you see, and we thought it's up to them to promote reconciliation, we can get on with our lives. So we waited for them and they won. When they won then, and we thought, well, then we'll become a united nation, ongoing. It's when we started to lose, and all hell broke loose, as far as I'm concerned. Because in 1995, 96, it was all right, that's why we could believe in it. We were winning. But man, once we started dropping from top 4, rugby, football, top 20, and becoming this and losing, sometimes not even qualifying, then we got very, very upset. All right, I've got the people here to present. My next speaker is the Reverend Molo from the South African Council of Churches, and let me call Dr. Gustav Klassen from the Dutch Reformed Church, Mr. Thabo Moloja from the South African Union of Students. Take your seats, as well as Mr. Tembing Osi Josopu from the South African Youth Council. Please come forward. Thank you. Rep. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the program director and the minister and the ministers present. Greetings to you all. I want to start with a small disclaimer, Mr. MC. Nowadays, you have to put people at ease when you are saying you are a reverend or pastor or priest. I didn't bring any petrol, nor did I bring any snake or anything else. So people can relax. I stand here on behalf of the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, the Reverend Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who unfortunately is not able to honor his invitation because of things that affect his health and also the load that he has. The South African Council of Churches, Ms. Minister, and the extinguished people who are here, is distinguished, not extinguished. Distinguished people who are here wants to start by affirming the importance of this conversation and this mobilization of all of us into a common purpose of making South Africa a place that all of us belong to with dignity, respect, and commitment towards one another. And we affirm that because we believe at the core of what we are is the need to find one another. And in that finding one another, are able to work together for a common direction that is divine, that is noble, and that is transformative in character. The SACC, as it is known, is an ecumenical association of Christian churches. It represents many Christian churches, and it finds itself in this conversation steeped in its own tradition, a tradition that has been shaped, amongst others, by stalwarts like Desmond Tutu and Beyers Naudé, who not only in language, but also in action, showed us what it is to develop and shape a new country, and knew the demands of what that might mean. We in the SACC, inspired by those living in the context of a movement that links with many South Africans, come to this moment to offer ourselves, not only our history, not only indeed our resources, but the connections of our people. The church exists in every village. The church exists in every ward. The church exists in all the corners that make this nation our nation. And we as the SACC then offer that to this country, not as a self-righteous attempt to prove that we are better than others, but simply as a yeast called upon to be sown into the world so that the world becomes better because we all live in it in our own ways. The SACC, in its quest to know where God wants this country to go to, has come to a campaign which we call the South Africa We Pray For. That campaign, Mr. Minister and MC, is one that seeks to say to the church and to the country as a whole that South Africa needs to move away from the euphoria of freedom into the actual working out the consequences of freedom. That South Africa as a country needs to realize that we cannot subcontract who we are and are becoming. That South Africa cannot give itself to be defined by others in order to find itself. That South Africa have to find ways to master not only its collective memory, to master not only its collective commitment, to master not only its collective wishes and dreams, but also to master its collective sacrifice in creating that which we believe this country needs to be. In order to do that, the Council of Churches believe that South Africa has to start with what we call a healing and a reconciliating, deepening journey. And by that, we mean this. Whether we like it or not, we have to realize that our soul as a country is a wounded soul. That our soul individually is also wounded. That our soul as families is also wounded. That we could not live through the trauma of a deliberate system that sought not only to fragmentize us as communities, but that also sought to destroy the internal understanding of personhood, and emerge with that and accompany that with a violent system that made us know no other way to speak except to shout or to shoot or to detain or to shut down. And if we emerge from that, we have to acknowledge that that woundedness has deformed who we can be at our best. And there's a need for us as a nation to confront that woundedness, not in the sense of being defeated, but with a sense of understanding that within, deep in our own souls, in our own hearts, there's agency of transformation. And therefore the urgent call of our time is to look ourselves as a nation and realize that our healing has not yet found its full completion. And we now must stand together and confront that. And we also say, as part of that journey, we also need to realize that the family is one of the most destroyed instruments of our history. We have come to discover that close to 70% of young people don't know how to live with both parents. We have come to realize that many fathers are absent. We have come to realize that with the pressures of work and all that it brings in our own situation, our nation, we have delegated the rearing of children to our aunties who are supposed to clean our homes. They have now become the mothers to and fathers to the children themselves. And we are saying to ourselves, if we cannot confront that reality as a nation and put back the family at the center of what it is to be human, we are releasing to the world people who don't know what it is to be responsible. People do not know how to live in a way they are accountable somewhere. People don't know what it means to give up their resources, not for their own individual and their benefit, but for their families and also. And we believe as the council that needs work. We believe as a council that we can't talk of reconciliation where poverty and exclusion is pervasive as it is. That it is an illusion to tell people, don't worry, as long as Bafana wins, as long as the Springboks wins, we will be fine. We cannot say to our people, as long as we come to rallies and we make grand statements in rallies, you should be fine. Something needs to say to them that poverty, that exclusion is a common cause for all of us. That those of us who have the fortune to have something to eat, not out of commitment to charity, but out of commitment to justice, begin to say to themselves, I'll give myself as a gift to the nation, so that my class position, I need to be traded as I transform the livelihood of others. So therefore, poverty and exclusion is a key area of serious commitment. We say part of that means the economic transformation of this country is something that we cannot play down. We cannot talk of racism and allow ourselves to be derailed by Penny Sparrow and don't go to JSE and look at it and say to ourselves, the voice is not vulgar, but the consequences are more devastating. How is it then that we as a society can look at that and ask ourselves those questions? And then the SABC says, if we are going to transform this nation, we have to deal with anchoring democracy. We have to find a way to make our people participate in the running of their country. Our people should learn to realize that democracy is not about electing somebody to do the work. That democracy is not simply about making sure that every 5 years we go and vote for somebody. Our people need to realize that at the core of democracy is taking upon each individual the responsibility of reshaping this country. And that responsibility means for making sure that the elections go well. And the SABC offers itself as an instrument to be monitored when those elections take place. But it moves further to say we need to hold each other accountable. The SABC says we cannot be silent when resources that must serve our people are being siphoned and are being destroyed by some of us whom we have trusted with the responsibility to take care of our common purse, and they've decided to use the common purse as a way for them to enrich themselves. We need to raise a collective responsibility
that says to our people, bribing a metro police in order for you not to get a ticket is something that we need to be intolerant to. We have to take responsibility in anchoring those institutions that build our responsibility together. And when we do that, the SACs believe the project of South Africa that is not only ordinary, but that is extraordinary, is one that we can all share together. And the world will not only be marveled by a lack of a civil war, it will be inspired by a new dream that has emerged from a people of great mobility and divine inspiration.
Well, Reverend, for a moment I thought I was going to see a few people come forward. I'm going to confess well, very inspired speech, and we appreciate that. And it's Joachim Bull in the house here, he's in the room. Well, at the beginning, you see, I thought Joachim could steal a few lines from you and convert them into one of his songs. You see, when he spoke about there being a church in every ward, in every village, that there's a church in every township in our nation. In our nation. In our nation. All right, let's continue with the proceedings, and we've got a bit of life. I can feel, you know, so for those who've not been to church in a long time, we feel like we've covered up. We are continuing with the program, and I want to remind you, we're going to break for lunch after all the submissions, and when we come back, it will be your turn to also make a contribution. So I have to inform you of that, because sometimes, you know, the speakers who came here had to think about it first. So don't, after lunch, ask to speak and only then start to think about what you want to say. I tell you, I deal with this business every day, and it can be very frustrating when you are talking to someone and you can tell that it is only at that time that they are thinking about what they want to tell everybody else, right? So I'm giving you lead time. Think about what you want to say after lunch, right now. Whilst you're doing that, Dr. Gustav Klassen, representing the NG Kerk, is here with us.
I think it's a bit unfair to give me a chance after my colleague inspiring words. You know, I'm from the NG Kerk, or the Dutch Reformed Church, and they are notorious for their paper drying sermons. So luckily he was first. First of all, a word of gratitude to the Minister and organisers for inviting the NG Kerk to be part of this meeting. Thank you for the privilege to be part and possibly contribute to a convention on an important theme of nation building, cohesion and reconciliation. Nation building seeks to create a strong national identity that recognizes the diversity and historical narratives of its entire people. When a nation is divided on ethnic, religious, socio-economic and racial lines, there is always an unhealthy lingering of tension and lack of cohesiveness for growth and development, as various groups become skeptical and resentful of each other. The task of nation building is a holistic one, with church and government as partners, embracing together efforts the common good of people. It's a duty of the church to prepare its members for responsible and effective participation in nation building. The key Christian ethical principles are love, justice, hope, and the promoting of a common good. In the process of national building, the NG Kerk is focusing on building a nation based on the very concrete values articulated by our Christian faith. The NG Kerk, consisting of approximately 1 million members, is a church only when it exists for others. The church must share secular problems of ordinary life, not dominating, but be helpful and serving. The relationship between church and government must be dynamic, critical, and creative solidarity with each other. The relationship becomes a process propelled by the motive to serve and to bring every human, man and woman, every citizen to become more fully human. The restoration of wholeness and dignity to many millions of people and their environment requires a massive response and participation of Christians. It is a theological and ethical task that ought to be perceived as an act of genuine respect for justice, equality, and fairness. It is holistic and transcends boundaries of race, nationalities, cultures, and ideologies. Our task as the NG Kerk is not to hold back and be indifferent to others, but to be a genuinely prophetic witness and builder of a South African nation and broken lives in our quest to fight and speak against all forms of systemic evils with love and justice, without prejudice of the other. How can the Church or the NG Kerk contribute? The basic fibre of the unity and cohesion of the South African nation is being challenged. The present injustices and social ills that engulf our land are a testament that in the past 22 years we have fallen short of the post-apartheid promise of a just, reconciled and equitable society, free of racial, tribal, xenophobic and gender prejudice, free of corruption and with enough food and shelter for every citizen and for each child born to grow to their God-given potential. Thus we have fallen short in our efforts to heal the wounds of the past and bring about lasting reconciliation based on equity and justice, reconciliation and peace. The Church will not only continue to pray for unity and cohesion, spreading love for one another. The Church, as part of its calling and witness, is concerned and wants to address the following: the huge levels of poverty, inequality and employment. In addressing poverty, the NG Kerk is always looking creatively to enlarge its 1 billion per annum budget to empower and support the more than 5 million marginalized people of this land. With its EDC programs, early child development programs, and other educational programs, focusing on grade 11s and 12s, the NG Kerk is committed to address, through its 1,200 congregations nationally, the problem of the high dropout rate of school children. We are distressed by the plague of extreme violence, rape and domestic violence, marriage dissolution and social strife, which may be well linked to the rising household economic stress. In this regard, we embarked on a season of human dignity, together with our family of churches, addressing with a variety of projects and programs these evils. We are alarmed by the degree to which we are still a traumatized nation and how that plays itself out. This is evident in the way racism is still well and alive, and also includes the way we respond to any misdeed occasioned by foreigners. In this regard, we made various statements on racism, developing material that is used in the NG Kerk in other denominations. We are also in partnership with our brothers, the SABC, instrumental in the organizing of reconciliation meetings between ex-conscripts and ex-freedom fighters to bring healing and reconciliation about. We are in need to have a wider discussion about restoring the moral order with a basic set of values and the determination of what becomes an un-South African conduct. The NG Kerk wants to be part of this discussion. To combat these challenges, the NG Kerk is focusing, positioning itself with an infrastructure, passionate members and resources. It is important that Christians make a strong case for being actively involved in nation building. We do it because it's our moral obligation to reach into our own Ubuntu by recognizing the humanity in others and our responsibility to the greater environment of society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mruti. Now we're going to hear from the South African Union of Students, Mr. Thabo Moloja. Please come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers who are here, I greet you all. Minister Mthethwa, I would like to give you an example of what happened last year when we were invited to join a group of South African young people in a China Africa youth program. As young people who left the country, there was about 50 of us. And the 50 of us, the first thing when we arrived in China, instead of them taking us to the high tech and all the expectations that we have thinking about China from the African continent, they took us to their cultural and heritage site and taught us about their culture and their people. And that was the first lesson that we learned about the people of China and how they conduct their affairs. The second to it then took us to Shanghai Olympia Museum, which is more of a sporting activity that they take pride in. And the other things were the last part in our trip around that site. I think I must thank the invite that has been given to the South African Union of Students. One of its founding members in the first ACD, Comrade Yeshet Pillay, who was part of the First National Executive Committee. At the time, he was a student and a student activist at the University of Cape Town. I must thank also your hardworking team, because we got a very unusual call at 7 p.m. being invited to this event. But once we're invited at 7 p.m., we know that there are people who are committed to work, and they work even all hours to ensure that programs like this day indeed happen. And I think for that, we must thank the team that is working with you in your office. The South African Union of Students, many of you might not know it. It's the University Federation of SABC, which I've been given the responsibility to serve for the past 3 years, where we organize all university SABCs to develop a common program in the country, but also to link them up with other like-minded student unions in the continent and globally. We believe that the opportunity presented to us, and I must indeed say that we're told that it's 10 minutes team ahead of time. We have 10 minutes, and we must not come and speak about the challenges that we have. We all know about them. Instead, we must be pragmatic about what ought to be the solutions and the type of programs we pursue going forward. The building of an enriched and civilized, prosperous and united South Africa, the vision which has been formed, we believe, by the Freedom Charter, which declares that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. We believe we are party to that view. It's not only the government responsibility or those who are elected in by various political parties, but all of us as society to ensure that we build such a basic vision by all in our country. The past 21 years of our country, we realize that the demons of racism and sexism, as well as Afrophobia and homophobia, continue to persist in our country. The democratic government, through its legislative mandate, has outlawed all forms of discrimination, be it sexually, color, race, religion, or creed. Efforts have been made through state-funded programs and empowerment programs to uplift the previously disadvantaged poor to live a better life. Yet poverty, unemployment, and inequalities continues and undermines progress made against these achievements. We note that The opening of beaches to all racial and gender groups will mean nothing unless majority of the people can access them. The free Wi-Fi service in Pretoria and Johannesburg will mean nothing if majority of the people can't afford a gadget to access that particular Wi-Fi. We know that the opening of our access to universities by all racial groups will mean nothing if the majority of the people don't afford high tuition fees. Hence the need that access must rise in our sector. The inequalities of this country, poverty and unemployment, must be dealt with and resolved, and that one was one of the things that must unite us as a country going forward. We agree, Minister, that this is not necessarily part of your responsibility, but in terms of government heading the interministerial committees, they should be able to look into this. South believes in the 4 pillars of the nation building and social cohesion as informed by the Social Cohesion Summit of 2012, which identifies diversity, inclusivity, access, and shared values. We take it, team, and we'll note these achievements, team, that the 1995 Rugby World Cup, the 1998 Africa Cup of Nations, the 2010 World Cup, the Oscar winning of both Charlize Theron and Tsotsi created a micro level unity for our country, where all of us celebrated the fact that the country can achieve when we are united. Similar activities can be observed in our sector during the both ongoing intervarsity games and its successes in uniting students behind a common goal. Sports, art and culture knows no race, knows no gender, and knows no class. It knows no nationalities. May we use these tools and dialogue to overcome both historical and emerging challenges. In responding to these challenges, students, activities and student leaders must strive for the following: a diverse and inclusive and accessible by all cultural activities as well as dialogue. We must do away with the fact that in our sector we still have rugby reserved exclusively for the whites and soccer reserved exclusively for the blacks. We must do away with the fact that we still see choirs as being predominantly black and ballet dances being predominantly white. We must transform our institutional cultures, philosophy and system to ensure that all students feel welcome and embrace different cultures and identities in those particular institutions. Greater dialogue is needed in our country on both what unites us rather than what keeps us apart. Greater dialogue is needed in our country on both progress made as well as challenges in resolving those. We believe that a lot of things can be done in our sector. Initially, we have been told that we must come with particular activities which we believe must be undertaken to resolve some of these challenges. But I had indicated to a colleague who gave us the information that it will not be possible to come with a blanket approach to these challenges. I'll give a typical example. Here in Johannesburg, where we are, or in Pretoria, a better example. A university like the University of Pretoria is uniquely different from the Tshwane University of Technology just adjacent to it. And therefore, what could work for the University of Pretoria will not necessarily work for the University of Tshwane. But what we've indicated is, in most instances, and we're looking into the history and some of the successes that we have had in sports, art and culture, is that they are exclusionary in their form and in how they are created. Mainly because, like I indicated earlier on, that some activities are reserved for particular groups. And this is a historical thing that has been there over time. But we believe that we must start to focus really on participation on all the students as well as staff groups in our activities, be it sports, be it culture, or be it other activities. We must start to celebrate and take serious beyond just sitting here and resolving that we will celebrate the Africa Day. Because most of us don't even know when we celebrate Africa Day, like we know how to celebrate some of our weekends. We must also have celebration and heritage exchange. Part of the challenge that sector is experiencing, Minister, is the fact that there's a lot of study tours going abroad and there is none going into the continent. So we need to focus on ensuring that we have study tour and student exchanges of our own in the continent and then from our African brothers and sisters. In closer team, I say may we talk to each other and not past each other. May we embrace each other rather than tolerate each other. There is beauty in our diversity. Let us celebrate it. It is in our hands. And I thank you.
Well, the youth leading by example there spoke for less than 10 minutes. So we must give them a round of applause. Well, thanks very much for your submission. Tabo, we do take the points. So I thought for a moment you were going to say ballet must fall and quiet must rise or whatever. So you are calling for them to be put together, right? And maybe even call on the white community to join in those church services run by the different prophets and so on. Just for a bit of religious experience. Dr. Klassen, it wouldn't harm to go and attend the pastoral prophet in Boros. And also your other version of how sermons are conducted. Where are you based, Dr. Klassen? In Pretoria, well, it's easy for you. You just call the guys in Harambo and Social Movement. All right, let's continue with our program. Mr. Tembikos is Joseph from the South African Youth Council. And once we do that, Kosisipo Mahlangu, please come forward. Father Mangaliso and Culture as well, please come forward. And Mayor Anissa Baloi, please take your places now.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I won't be wasting much time on citations and greetings, but thank you for the opportunity that you have afforded as a Community Minister. I'm deliberately saying Community Minister, not honorable, because I'm just an activist. You might see that I'm not holding a gadget, no carrying a laptop, no having a prepared speech. I think most people have correctly, or in a more diplomatic way, called for unity, standing together. But is that realistic? I think we must push it further. When we are saying let's stand together, let's be united, what about those who are not prepared to unite? There are those elements that still don't want to accept our own democratic breakthrough. I don't think a minister will be doing justice to sit here talking nicely about each other as if everything is well. We will paint a rosy picture when all is not well. We know for a fact, an example it has to be, I've made it previously, that the remark by Penny Sparrow, it was not because she hates Blackpool per se, but the crux of her message, it was protection of her own privileges that she used to enjoy in the past. Probably Blackpool used not to go to that beach. Now you see many of them flooding towards my own comfort zone. Therefore, they should not come to where is my comfort zone. That's the main issue. Now, privilege is the one that has made us to gather here. Because one group protects its own privilege that it acquired on the basis of our previous apartheid era. Now, when you see that one group is growing and challenging our own comfort zone, that's when we start to have problems. Hence, you see today that there are issues with BE, there are issues with affirmative action. One example that we have to look at, we have one organization by AFRA. When we speak about your economic transformation, whenever our own progressive government starts to pass certain pieces of legislation, it's taken to court. And in most instances, they win those cases in court. Because of what? Our own constitution. They are protected. Now, if we can tamper with that constitution and change it. Number two, our own sufficient that even our judiciary is still untransformed. Hence, they are quickly running to courts and win. So we can speak about economic transformation, directions in the economy. As long as we have not tampered with the judiciary, the constitution will still come back to come minister and sit here again, would have done anything. And racism will still exist. Hence, I am saying, once I've been in the cycle, one to me is that one, let's transform the judiciary. Two, let us reform the constitution. If we are to tamper with our own economic structure, because the base of our own economy is protected in the constitution. That's why it is very difficult for the government to move forward with its economic transformation agenda. That's one submission we want to make. Secondly, the same as this dialogue, community, we can say we do commit ourselves aside, we do dialogues, etc., etc. And you'll find where this dialogue is being done. Kaelicha, Langa, etc. You won't hear that a dialogue has been done on racism or Constantia. They are being done to those areas of the people who have accepted the reconciliation project. Because we have said long ago, we are willing to reconcile. And Constantine was saying that black people in the main have been reconciling, they are willing to reconcile. We must call things by their own name, that there are those who don't want to reconcile. Let's not go and preach to the converted. Let's go and preach to those who are not converted. One last issue on media that I think Uba Mpumalelo has touched on, and I'm glad that the Minister of Communication is also here. What we're being fed on a daily basis in the media is not really what we ought to build in terms of cultural consciousness. Culturally, we are being given a picture that for you to be a cool young person to be accepted, you must wear in a particular way, you must walk in a particular way, you must say dude, my man, my nigger, and all that. That's not the kind of culture I want to see, Minister. If you speak about cultural consciousness, we need to have programs on television that speak to our own core values as a nation. etc. Now it means the journalists we employ, the producers we employ, first they must be conscientized, even in their curriculum. But because you can't just be taking someone because of his having a journalistic degree, because then you think that person will think progressively, understand the program of government and consciousness of our people. Something that is part of those things that we can speak about a way of media as long as on a daily basis what I'm saying. I think what we must emphasize on, we have spoken about economic transformation, political liberation, etc., etc. I think as a country we have not spent time to speak about psychological liberation. Right. Psychological liberation speaks of two things. As Bibo once wrote, psychological liberation speaks on two things. That you as a white person are not superior to a black person. You as a black person are not inferior to a white person, but we're all human beings. We have not invested on freeing the minds of our own people. Even today, we still think less of ourselves. Even still today, we still think that we're big because of our own privileges, because of our own color. Means I think one of the projects that your department must invest on, psychological liberation, and media will play a huge and a big role in that. But for some other time, we need to speak at some point, if the time was enough, on what do we mean by non-racialism, what do we mean by anti-racism. There seems to be an overlap between the two, as Mamluli has touched on. Whether do we strive for an anti-racial society or a non-racial? If not, what does this two mean? We connect with each other, which is the best way that we can talk about. I don't have much time to speak on, as I've said before. We can be united, we can preach standing together, but we must also speak about those who are not prepared to stand together with us and with us. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tembiko Joseph, thank you very much for your submission. I don't think it's the media that's going on with the hatred stuff. It's the youth themselves who are using that language. We try and correct them all the time and say, who's Jude now? Who's a nigger here? But they insist. And that's the new way. But nevertheless, no, just teasing. Thank you. I'm going to call on Coach Sipo Matlangu from the National House of Traditional Leaders to come and talk to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Program Director. Honorable Minister Honorable Minister Amakosi Akona distinguished guests. I am here to speak on how the institution of traditional leadership will contribute towards a front for nation building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. Okay. Yeah, my voice is a bit low, but I will try to raise it a bit. I think this is a question, or this is a topic that is utmost in our mandate as the institution of traditional leaders. The institution has always worked towards unity, stability, and peace in our communities. Traditional leaders have always embraced people of other cultural backgrounds. At the Sandton conference in 2001, President Mandela said, I quote, "One of the most powerful ways of children and young adults acquiring values is to see individuals they admire and respect, exemplify those values in their own being and conduct." Leadership requires that all those in position, including members of parliament, should display and conduct themselves in a manner that promotes social cohesion and tolerance. Young people may learn some behavior that may defeat the noble intention of building a united society when our leaders behave in a manner that is foreign to culture of respect and tolerance. As traditional leaders, we are at the coalface of the community. But the community that we lead is a community that is the poorest. It is the community that has been confined previously to homelands or to what they used to call as black reserves. It is a community that is still looked down upon. It is a community that comprises of farm laborers that are still racially abused and underpaid. It is a community that I believe is an angry community because of all these ills that they have experienced, the injustice of the past. But yet it is a community that is a forgiving community. It is a community that has accepted reconciliation. It is a community that has embraced reconciliation. Even us, as the institution of traditional leaders, I think whenever one stands up and when people see a young person, they always expect to see a very old person. They always expect to see a person that has not gone to school. They always expect to see a person that is not willing to transform. But yet we are an institution that looks forward to transformation. We're an institution that forever works towards transformation. So as we do our work, I think what is most important when one was listening to other presenters is that we need to find a way of how to pull those that are not willing to transform. How do we bring them closer as the institution? How do we engage with them? We are of the view that interventions that are needed, of the view that one of the interventions needed is to create a platform for the youth, for an interface between the elders and the youth. It is well known that customary law and custom is mainly unwritten, but known by all. I will put that in inverted commas. Known by all. We assume that it is known by all. But I can safely say that our youth do not necessarily know what we are talking about. And I think as the institution of traditional leaders, we are in the process of changing that. We are partnering with the University of Cape Town, the research chair, within the institution, and other universities, international universities, where we want to start a process of writing some of these customary beliefs. We know that culture is dynamic. We know that customary law is a living being, but we need to document so that people can always have a referral point. Even when it changes, it transforms, we should be able to write that. Some of the customary practices that we are in charge of the institution, they also need to be reviewed in order to be in line with the dispensation we are now in. So we are busy with that process where we are also transforming and reviewing some of the cultural practices that are not in line with the Constitution. Once that task has been completed, it will be taken to our people so that they can have a say in what we are proposing as the institution. Once we have a buy-in from those communities, because each and every culture, I think it evolves over time. So we need to ask ourselves, in some of our cultural practices, that as we do this, is it still necessary to do it this way? If not, how to transform it, but still maintain the core principle of that culture, but remove the elements that are undermining other people. We have an annual calendar, Minister, for traditional leaders, at which we celebrate our cultural heritage and the lives and times of our heroes. At these events, we communicate messages of peace, stability, patriotism, self-pride, nation-building, social cohesion, and reconciliation. We also embrace the spirit of unity in diversity. I think almost each and every week, even traditional leaders that are here, they have that responsibility where each and every year they would have those cultural and heritage celebrations. And in those cultural and heritage celebrations, government finds a platform to be able to address people on messages of social cohesion as well as nation building. We also invite other stakeholders that are also serious in terms of social cohesion to be able to come and partner with us and be part of these calendars and be able to speak during this event so that we can build a nation that we'll all be proud of. In this way, we will be giving effect to the 2012 Social Cohesion Declaration to mobilize society in its entirety to work together to build a caring and proud society based on shared values, a vision informed by the principles of constitutional democracy, Ubuntu, human rights and equality, non-racialism, non-tribalism, and non-sexism, inclusivity and social justice, redress and transformation, intercultural and community cooperation, social solidarity, empowered, fair and inclusive, active citizenship, civic responsibility, unity in diversity, national consciousness and identity. And we also want to afford, I think Professor Mohoro did talk that they want to engage with the institution, that the institution, our traditional councils would be open for us to be able to dialogue. I think there may be things that the institution is doing that may not be correct. And I think during those dialogues, I think we can discuss those things, and then transform the institution together. As I conclude, the role of the institution of African reality must be enhanced in giving meaning to issues of identity, national unity, and re-engineering of social institutions, especially family values, traditions, culture, and spirituality. Nation building without culture and spirituality is like a human body without a soul. Thus, cohesiveness of our society needs to give full recognition to the pivotal role that must be played by African reality. Some of the work that is done by the institution will feature prominently when the state president opens the National House on the 26th of February 2016 at the Old Assembly in Cape Town. Pula.
I wasn't sure how to go about it, whether I should stand up or sit right there. Because I know the fines that go with these things of not observing protocol of the traditional leaders. You could be fined anything from a couple of goats to a few lashes and so on. And I looked at myself and checked my age and wondered which category would I fit in. There you are, an ordinary subject in the eyes of the chief, and I don't even got a few rules here. You can hide behind them in the event I'm transgressing any of the protocols. But thanks very much for the submission there. Let me call on Mr. Welcome Msomi, Mr. Kompumluana, and Ms. Nomasonto Mazibuko to please come forward to occupy the seats here in front. Mr. Welcome Msomi from the Living Legends Legacy Program, Ms. Toko Mpumlwana from Gender Commission, and Mayor Nomasonto Mazibuko of Albinism, South Africa, speaking on behalf of people living with disabilities. As I do so, please welcome Mayor Dalisa Baloyi, who speaks on behalf of business. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and Minister, thank you for asking me to say a few words from the floor, and I hope I'll do justice. Thank you very much for inviting us here, Minister, as citizens of this beloved country of ours. And I heard someone earlier say wounded. Wounded we are, but we're going strong. Business, we have a moral responsibility. And coming from the Black Business Council, I speak on behalf of business today as asked by the Minister, but understanding that there's big business. And all of us have a moral responsibility as business controls most of the resources of the nation and sets the agenda for most of change. And if they don't, then there's chaos. Speaking after the young people, starting from the one who mentioned 42%, the youth, and the two young people. I think as parents, we align ourselves with your fight, Minister, and because they snuck in the student thing, I'll also sneak in the parents thing. Yeah. We support your fight, but we also say, hashtag the grades must rise. Yeah. So let's balance the two. As a paying mother of students, please, the grades must rise. Let's balance the two. We want you to pass, we want you to succeed. Young people fight, Minister, because we pit them against each other on the basis of race. They go to the same schools, and we promote some when they graduate, and not all of them. They are not like me, who went to some bush university, but they went to the same schools. When they get into the corporate arena, the black ones feel like they don't belong. They are overlooked. I recently went to a funeral where I followed 3 young women. One was doing her second master's, the other one was doing her PhD, and the other one had a master's in public policy. And they were all asking each other, what are you doing? And the other one says, I'm where I started 10 years ago. I constantly get overlooked. But please let us not stop studying, even if it's for our obituaries. You understand? So I was eavesdropping, but I had to get in there. They feel they are not appreciated. Maybe in the past you could say, I come from the University of the North, so I can compete with somebody from Wits or from, even though I thought I did. But no, we can't use that. We simply cannot use that. The problem, as South Africans has been said before, is that usually we do not want to face it as it is. And the young person now just spoke. We usually don't mean what we say, and at times we don't say what we mean. That's the problem. Let us promote education as business equality. And if you go past private schools, you'll find that they have adverts from big companies. But go past a school in the township, you'll not see that. Minister, conciliation versus reconciliation, we must speak truth to. power, unless we tackle them, we're not going anywhere slowly. We must confront the demon for us to be able to exercise it. If we don't, we'll be indeed speaking about this next year. If you look at, somebody spoke about sports, I had written here quickly that we have an Olympic team that is going to Rio later this year. That Olympic team has no money. Nobody's putting money into Team South Africa with many sporting codes. But look at the money that is put into rugby and cricket for one team. Huh? Why can't we equalize it so we reach more people? More people. So some of this racism is subtle, so we don't see it. And when there are events, Minister, you'll struggle to get money to support an event that is regarded as a black event. But when you are invited to something, ShopRite Women of the Year, look at the sponsors. I raised my case there. So we must be vocal about it. We have become bold as South Africans in our skins. We really do not realize the harm and the damage that we are causing to our nation. As we pronounce the things that Minister spoke about, that we say today, and then tomorrow we apologize. So we racist today, tomorrow we apologize, then we are okay. But the damage is done already. We must stop people, Minister, and I'm glad you said that. We are working on something that will stop people from being blatantly racist, because it harms the psyche of the young people. I always like to tell people that you might think it's not harming you. I left this country to go to school in another country. And when in one class I got the highest marks, I didn't think it was me because I was the only black student. And I was a young activist in South Africa. We are equal. But in my psyche, somehow I still believe I wasn't good enough. I didn't believe I deserved to have an A+ and beat all the students all white. You understand? So as somebody calls people names, it has an indelible effect on the young people. So we must deal with it, change it. If we don't change it, our children will spit on our graves because we don't want to bequeath a racist nation to our children. As business, we tend to be selective in our display of disdain. We saw the media houses, and I'm glad Mr. Kabela is here, taking ads, print media, radio, television, or no to xenophobia. And that was good. But our silence was and continues to be loudly deafening on the issue of racism. How many ads have we seen the media take up? Say no to them, nothing in my name, racism must fall. You don't see them, they are not flighted. We need to take a stand that will remind us every day that we are a wounded society. Racism is at the heart of inequality in business. I'm old now, so maybe I could have been a casualty then. But I don't believe my twins need to be casualties. We can't call for international investors when our institutions do not want to invest in our own nation, and we don't understand why the rand is not doing so well. By the way, international strife, it's not just South Africa. Like we get to read every day. Oh, South Africa is sliding, the government is doing so bad. It's not just South Africa. It's not just South Africa, it's everywhere. Especially in the black areas. Yet we all bank with the banks. We all pay insurance. I saw Tim is standing up. So we must spread the benefits broadly. But if we do not speak out, it will not happen. The money is not used fairly. We let the culprits go unpunished. Indeed, I can assure you, Professor Nkondo, that the struggle is hard work. But the economic struggle is even harder. Because the treasuries of big financial institutions have no mechanism that will make you and me reach them and be accountable. Unless we recognize the fact that whether I put 500 rand in a bank or 5 trillion, it's money in the bank. It contributes to that. The fight to end this must not be sporadic, but it must be ongoing and relentless. Business has been asked by government, I'm told by the minister, that we must understand that we are not an island. South Africa is on the continent of Africa. They made a clarion call that in our offices, in our boardrooms, on our grounds, we have both flags, the AU flag and the South African flag. Can we do that? So we remind ourselves every day, because sometimes we don't think we're African. We are African. So that every time there is something that has to do with the African continent, we move with everybody else. Yeah. Because it starts at home, but it's African in nature. And if it is happening in South Africa, this racism stuff, it is happening all over the continent. So let's rid the African continent of racism, of inequality, of poverty, whose basis is racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaking from a business perspective there. And those who were around many years ago would know that he was one of the proudest South African exports of his time when he produced the Zulu version, if I may say, of Macbeth, Umabata, Welcome Song in the early 70s, and gave inspiration to a lot of artists in the country, and took the play around the world. It was one of the earliest exports from South Africa at the time. So many artists look up to him, and he's here speaking as chairperson of the Living Legends Legacy Program.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Minister. It's interesting that we are here because when the Minister came up with the idea of recognizing the living legends, I was very, very excited. Because those living legends are amazing people. Those living legends are just people who have given so much to this country. And in many cases, they are forgotten. And already what we have been able to do, and then we have our trustees, like my brother Don Matera, Peter Makubane, Wally Serote, Adele Blank, and Sister Leta Mbulu. to be part of this movement, to share information with the young ones, to be able to say, I encourage you, to say that I want you to know the path or the journey that I've taken. And as we see, and we've had master classes with Abdullah Ibrahim, master classes with Don Mantera, master classes with Kaifas Semenya in Mpumalanga. But it's not just about that. It is also about how we look at ourselves inside and the power that we have. It's amazing that we have people in the townships and everywhere, and yet they don't understand their power. In fact, there are people who understand your power more than you. That is why they're building up supermarkets next to you, in your areas. Because you cannot think that you can build a supermarket. You have no power, you tell yourself. You have fear. And that is why with the Living Legends the other day we talked about the healing. If you're not healed, you'll never be successful. If your children are not healed, you'll never be successful. And the reason, even when your children are not healed, is because they see you being unhealed. Because you, as a parent, you transfer it to your children. When you look at black people walking in the supermarkets or in the malls, they seem to be timid. And when you look at other races, they're bold, they're powerful. You even move away for them to pass. You even allow your children to say, Namumlu. It's sad. It's very, very sad. And what you're talking about is to bring back the dignity. We have to have our dignity so that our children have that dignity. You can talk about racism and all those things if deep down inside you are empty. There's nothing that can be done for you. You can talk about how the banks operate nicely. And do they respect you? So that with the Living Legends, we are going to be sharing quite a number of things with the wisdom of these amazing people that we have. We are coming up with amazing things. And we are not going to be coming to you, Nyambos, asking for money. For money, give us the money. But we're going to create our own money. And we are going to have. And I mean it. And we're going to have a network of legends through the continent and beyond. When you look at the African Americans, how the African Americans are not respected, but they have a home. We will recognize them and do collaborations with them, because as people and people in the diaspora, we can change the situation. In fact, the education system is so bad. It needs to be changed. The education that we have is about us and our children feeding other people. It's crazy. We need to educate in different forms, and that is why this platform is going to be a platform of change. And Minister of Communications, we're going to change. We're going to change the SABC. Seriously. And I know you want it changed. Together with the Minister of Arts and Culture, together with yourself, together with the Minister of Tourism, that can be a powerful combination to do things our way, not in other people's way. Set up your agenda and you'll feel good inside. You will never remain poor, and your children will never remain poor. Why? Because God gave you the richness that is inside you, and you can make things happen for yourself and your children. So thank you very much, Minister. I know before Tim comes up, you know, I don't want to be chased away, you know, but this is a great initiative. And as living legends, we are going to contribute in a manner that has never been seen in this country, because we love the country, we love the people, we love people with talent. And thank you very much.
Well, unfortunately, even my friends who are welcome, I do get off stage, you see, so I was looking for another creative way of persuading you nicely, but you stuck to the time. Thank you very much, and very inspired presentation there. Let's now welcome Mayor Mpumlwana, Toko Mpumlwana from the Gender Commission to share with us her thoughts.
Minister, to the ministers present, the first thing I need to say is that we've got to do things differently. We need to accept that if we are to transform, we should remember that 52% of citizens, like the youth are 42%, we are 52% of citizens in this country are women. So please mainstream the voice of women in the dialogue about nation building. And amongst the things we should do is just to be conscious, never to make women speak last when people are going and tired, but also to have a very specific item on what does it mean for a woman of South Africa in the discussion that we're talking about. So now I'm conflicted about talking about CGE, Commission for Gender Equality, and also speaking on behalf of women, which is not fair because women should speak for themselves. So I will try to do both, Minister. And thank you for the opportunity that we have to also have an input in this session. I will try to share what we as the Commission for Gender Equality come across as we talk about our constitution and our nation building, and as we interact with the realities, the lived realities of women since our wonderful constitution, which will be 20 years this year. So this is one opportunity when we turn 20 in our constitution to reflect. As you can hear, people are beginning to say, let's tinker, let's do something about the Constitution because it pinches us somewhere. So that's something in our discourse we must begin to say, do we want to, is the problem the Constitution or the problem the people? That's the debate we should have. Is it the behavior of people or is it us? We are talking here about the status of women in South Africa. And I would like to say, in terms of the status quo of women in South Africa, we have a long journey that we have traveled. We've had charters written by women. Women have marched, and the issue of non-sexism is mainstreamed in our constitution. We have strong legislation. We are very grateful for the legislation and the constitution that has embedded non-discrimination and non-sexism. We have gender machinery. We have the Office on the Status of Women. We have Women's Ministry now. We have the Gender Commission. We have lots of of organizations that work in this space. And women have been working since 1994. They've not stopped working to try and make South Africa a better space for them to build equality. But what are the gaps that we're coming across as women and as we see at the Commission for Gender Equality? The question is there a backlash on equality between women and men in South Africa? And we argue that we are concerned that there seems to be a backlash. And the people, again, when the affirmative action laws of the country that says women and men are equal are being applied in the public and private spaces, there are voices that will say, we have had enough of women who want to take leadership. We want to make sure that these women, this is not the constitution we're talking about. So the question is there a backlash? We are trying to build social cohesion. So that's the question. Have we arrived where there is no non-sexism? Women are saying there's lots of it, of sexism. There are people who abuse diversity. The fact that you can form your own small group because the Constitution allows you to be who you are, to celebrate your culture, to celebrate your race, to celebrate your gender, it does not mean that your rights must infringe on the rights of the others in your community. And what are we getting? We are getting a situation where women are crying to us to say, we are being abused as women in South Africa. Gender-based violence in this country has gone up. Violence against women has gone up. The voices are not as loud as when we hear people talk about racism. We are very, very impressed that South Africans can come out so strongly against racism, and every minute and every second in our own country, women are killed, women are raped, children are killed, women are raped, and the voice is not as loud as we hear. And so, because someone came here, I think Pumelelo said, my right, when my right is violated, even if it doesn't affect you, speak louder as well. When women are abused, please, let's hear the voice of all South Africans speaking, because we are pleased and safe. Access to human dignity, ukuthwalwa, ukuhlolwa, etc. I was very pleased to hear the Honorable Traditional Leader say they are now going to work with people at higher education institutions, I think you said at the University of Cape Town, to look at cultural and customary practices that are harmful to women with a view to aligning them with the Constitution. All we can say as the Gender Commission is forward to that thinking, because that's what we want. We don't want cultural practices that go against the Constitution. We are against child marriages, and we still have child marriages practice here. We have female genital mutilation in the name of culture, rising in the culture, and we are not hearing voices against it. So we're very happy that religion and culture and the place of women. We have LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and intersex people, especially lesbians, being killed in our community. What do you hear? We hear people saying, in any case, it's not our culture. Are you going to throw away your daughter or your son because he's a homosexual in the name of culture? Our Constitution protects the right of people to choose who you are, and sometimes they don't choose who they are. They are just who they are. So the question is, how do we embrace the Constitution? It is a very challenging Constitution. It is not an easy Constitution. Has the status of women changed? Of course, we all admit it has changed in terms of our basic Constitution, the supreme law of the country. But have practices changed? We are saying again, we see a bit of backlash. Do women feel at home in South Africa? in all corners of the land. Where the spaces we enter, we are informed that not always do women feel that. In issues of inheritance, there are lots of women, when a husband dies and she finds that somewhere in terms of customary marriage, the family does not want to give her due, and somewhere in Johannesburg is wife number 2 who's got a paper, and there is havoc being raised because of patriarchy. Those are issues that we are dealing with. We also want to say access to opportunities, and for women, we come across a lot of that in terms of women empowerment, and someone talked about, you cannot talk about nation building on an empty stomach. I think it was in Fundis. The issue of poverty. The burden of poverty remains feminine, because at the end of the day, when a child has not eaten, the person who will have to make a plan is a mother, especially after I've heard that 70% of children live in single households without both parents, and it's mostly women who take care of that. So with food security issues, a challenge in South Africa today, and in the world, and in the region, what are we going to do about food security as we try to build this society? The issue of access to resources and access to food is critical. Care work. The care work in this country and unpaid work remains the burden of women in all households. And yet, it doesn't appear in the discourse of economists in the land. We ask those who've got great minds, who are doing research, intelligentsia, please cost that in the economy. How much do women who don't go to work formally produce in terms of the economy? We would like that put in the conversations. Civil society organizations play a big role, and it's a pity that we have not heard the voice of civil society. Just as civil society here, they play a big role in connecting government to people and access of government to people. What is the relationship between civil society organization and government and CSO to make sure that people understand this constitution? But most of these CSOs are closing because of resources. Again, the question that we need to ask before I close is, whatever we do when it comes to gender mainstream, ask yourself, is it fair? Is it just? Is it legal? Is it a reasonable? Would a person under this constitution, a reasonable person do it? And just recently, we have had a very interesting debate on the maidens and bursaries. I would be failing if I don't make a little comment on it. It's a serious conversation about practice versus the constitution. There are things we would really like to do, but what does the constitution say in terms of rights and freedom, equality, discrimination? Our laws are very clear, and therefore we ask the department, maybe it may be helpful, allow women to dialogue and have this sort of a dialogue, just as women, a huge one, where you will hear their voices from women themselves. What is pinching? How are they contributing? Because they already are contributing. And how can we make sure we mainstream that contribution? And how can we make sure they build this nation in a manner that we want it to be built, so that all that can then ensure that we build the South Africa we want? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Togo Pumbrana from the Gender Commission. We are just about to break, but before we do that, we're going to take one last submission, and I have to advise you again that Okay, we're going to take 2 submissions before we break for lunch. We'll also hear from Labour. But just to remind you that please prepare your own comments. When we come back later, we'll be taking submissions from the floor. Now we're going to hear from Ms. Nomasonto Mazibuko from Albinism South Africa. She's representing people living with disabilities. Welcome.
Minister and all the ministers that are here, thank you very much for the invitation. Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. Building a nation. I think when you talk building, you surely are looking at the architecture. Somebody has looked at the architecture, and as we gathered here this morning or today, we're building all the building material from different avenues, Minister. I'm here this morning representing disability. Disability which is looked at 2%. Wherever you go, they say the structure will allow 2% of disabled people. Disability in this country has been a wheelchair and a cane. Allow me that I'm going to say nothing about us without us. Specifically, I want us to look at and journey with me with the albinism being recognized by the United Nations in the L25 to say albinism has been there, is now recognized as a disability. And when you get into the disability arena, people look at you not once, but twice to say, yes, it is in a conversation where there are going to be elections and your name happened to be one of the nominees. And people ask themselves, it is educational in this building the nation that people with albinism have been there from time immemorial. Abantu abane-albinism bafikile eNingizimu Afrika, hayi kuphela Minister eNingizimu Afrika, bakhona eAfrika, bakhona kuzwelonke. But it has been those people who have been discriminated upon. They just came out and outshone. When Ubaba Umsomila Ebeti, people who are black wanted to be white. And it was difficult for us to say, I'm black and I'm proud. Pratim, the person next to you would say, really? Then you would run and come back and say, I don't have black. So, because you will even put a glove to say, I'm black and I'm proud. Nevertheless, it is said that albinism is a congenital disorder, and the medical scenario says a disorder. Immediately this child is born into this earth, hair comes with a disorder, and parents lamenting. Albinism doesn't only feature to black people only. It is a world phenomenon. Where are the people with albinism when we look at ourselves as a nation? People would call you ample pass. And you were not white to be white, and yet not black to be black. As we're building this nation, we're taking along all the people of this country, all the people of the world. And I'm saying today, Minister, it is very important, and I'm saying you are doing the architecture. As we're building this nation, we have traditional leaders. We've got traditional healers. We've got our parents, we've got our educators, we've got our medical people, we've got television here. SABC will only feature Nomasonto in the forum for standing, sitting up and down in the chair. What is the significance of those points? Are we aware that albinism needs to be encompassed in the social cohesion as one of those people. You're not born to be a woman. As you stand here as Nomasonto, you were born as a toddler, you went to the early childhood classroom, you became youth. That's why I'm saying, when we were striving to be black and be proud, I was there, but my fist was not black, and my soul was black. That is why I rose through the ranks to be standing here and saying, we are going to build this nation, we are going to have social cohesion with our people in the disability arena, and our voices will be heard. Let's go into the religious sector. Somebody, as I'm busy advocating on behalf of people with albinism, sent me a book. And I said to my husband, can I read this book? Because incidentally, 2 people from different places gave me the same book to read. The first chapter was very disturbing, and it would push you to say, if this happened to a person, what is it that these people are telling me? The lady who has written a book is a woman, and she says, I was very excited when I was pregnant of my first child and gave birth to a child that is neither looking like my husband, nor me, nor anybody in the family. But as I was expecting my second child, the question arose within me to say, is this child going to be the same like the child I'm having in the house? Which child happened to be having albinism? As they drove that night to go and tell their in-laws to say, we are very excited, our second baby is on the way. On their way back, unfortunately, because our roads are not safe, not only in South Africa, but everywhere in the world, the family, this couple, met with a car accident, and the husband and the firstborn child died. When she was at labor ward on that particular day, she was seated there and she complicated. She was very angry with God and said, God, you took my husband and my albino child away. Though I had not accepted that child, but she was my child. What are you saying now? Am I going to get another albino, or I am losing this child? And I'm saying, God, I'm talking to you in this labor ward. And a voice came up vividly. She was not dreaming. And the voice said, until you understand that all the gifts that you have come from God, and you have to consider God first. As a nation, we need to consider, as we unite to build this nation in our social cohesions, the traditional leaders, together with our spiritual leaders, are very important in molding us. As we go down, Minister, I'm sure you are aware that in the month of August last year, we had a very disturbing situation where a woman was killed with albinism, and the traditional healers were sending young people to go and take those parts and bring them back, chop them into pieces and sell them at a phenomenal amount. Are we saying, are we saying sifuna inhlanhla ngaphezulu ukuthi sisebenzise amandla ethu? We went to school. Yes, we believe that in our heads that we have as our traditional leaders, we are going to see. And when the people are diagnosed of certain disabilities, we shun and look down to those people and feel that if you've got epilepsy, there is traditional bewitchedness. I think we should unite as a country, not as South Africans only, but unite as Africa and say enough is enough to funny things. We are people, as we see the legends. In the legends, our disabled legends are there. And we salute our legends who have persevered and went through, who are still there saying, we will go forward as disabled. And we're challenging young people to say, as you climb the ladder of success, as you climb the ladder of success, be strong. Be proud of who you are. God does not do mistakes. Walk the walk and say, I am going to be educated. I am going to be an artist. I am going to play all the sporting codes. Even if you've got albinism, you don't have to go into the sun. You have to in the indoor games. It's a sporting code. Let us see our young children exceptionally working very hard to do all those sports that are indoor. As we go through building this nation, we are not going, and we are prepared that we are not going to leave anybody alone. Everybody must come along, especially people with disabilities. We need your voices. We need you to sit down and say, this is how I would like to be treated. This is what things work for me. Because everything works together for good to them that love the Lord. And I close. As South Africans, we lead. The businesswoman said, the banks will tell you there's no money, but as women, we will have money. As persons with disabilities, particularly as people with albinism, we would like to be included, and we are going to work towards getting into each and every avenue. But we need you, your patience. We need you not to look at us once. As you look at us more than once, know that we love one another and we need one another. Thank you.
There's no chance that you'll be looked at once. You stand out, you will not be ignored. You know how it is. When you say Amanda, everybody turns around. But of course, that's a sad story on the continent, as we know what goes on in countries such as Tanzania, for instance. The community of people living with albinism under attack. There are numerous stories. The government is trying, but it's a movement around the world that has got to be stopped. We appreciate your input, man. Thank you very much. I'm going to call on Mr. Dennis George from FEDUSA to please come forward. Thank you, sir.
I would have preferred Comrade George. But I'll take the Minister also. Minister, present here, delegates and comrades, my fellow South Africans, thank you for the invitation to participate in the panel discussion on nation building, social cohesion and reconciliation. Our country faces serious headwinds. The Monetary Policy Committee decided to increase the repo rate with 50 basis points and reduce the output for growth down from 1.9% to 1.5% for 2016 and from 2.1% to 1.6% for 2017. So these people are like prophets. They can look into the future. And it means that things are going to be more difficult. It's going to be more difficult for us also to find employment for young people. And, you know, we don't have any other choice but to work together, to stand together, and to fight together as a nation, because we are all South Africans. The reason Fees Must Fall campaign have confirmed that higher education has become unaffordable even for children of teachers and policemen. So if you live in society and you are working for the state but you can't afford to send your child to higher education, you understand what we're trying to say to you. Because our country is facing serious headwinds. And what is making things a little bit more difficult for us is the local government elections will be held later this year. And you can imagine how that's going to polarize us even more. Because, you know, everybody's got an ambition not to serve, but they want to lead. They don't understand that the politician is there to serve. You know, and they're going to do all kinds of things. So, from our side, we want to ask you, especially in these times, that we must pray for our country. We must pray for tolerance. We must pray for respect. Because I think many people have forgotten those important values. South Africa in this time need exceptional leadership that should be anchored in the constitutional values, which holds on to honesty, integrity and trustworthiness. It is important for South Africans to learn to innovate, to manage change and to listen to those with different opinions, perceptions and priorities than ourselves. This innovative approach should foster nation building, reconciliation and social cohesion. We need a new renegotiated social accord, which introduced a national minimum wages, and also to look at the wage-led recovery. Our country is really one of the most unequal societies in the world. You have a few people at the top that is extremely wealthy, and then you find the mass of our people are living in poverty. And we can't have the situation continue. From the producer side, we want to encourage you not to become despair, but to hold fast onto the values of our Constitution. But it's important also to measure progress. In 1994, there were about 2.5 million people who received an income from the state. Today, about 14 million people are receiving a monthly income from the state. That money doesn't come from the government, it comes from the people. It is you, the honest, hard-working South Africans, who pay your honest taxes. When you buy a bread, you pay 14 cents more or 14% more. And that is the kind of caring nation that we're talking about. So we spend about 154 billion rand a year. So we distribute it from people that are working, people that have spent in the economy, and we give it to people less fortunate. And those are one of the things that we as South Africans should really feel proud of. We have made progress. Social cohesion and nation building are an ongoing approach and suggest that all South Africans should work together within the provisions of the Constitution. The Freedom Charter also presents a strategic future framework proclaiming that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. The collective leadership should dedicate more attention to care and be passionate about the poorest of the poor. Citizens should use their opportunities in life in order to become more active partners in their own development. Social cohesion is about people living in harmony together and feeling a sense of belonging and participating in economic and social life. Chairperson, social cohesion could be defined as a process of reconstructing shared values, inclusive communities where inequalities in wealth and income is reduced. Our people should feel and know that they belong and are part of a common vision and a country. People should be part of the reconstruction and development to address the challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. Social cohesion is also crucial for any country that wants to engender confidence. This is so important as we recognize that the introduction of reforms in our country is necessary and important, and trust is an important element for building cohesion between citizens and government to confront the complex policy issues in the short term, which could result in long-term gains. FEDUSA is concerned that the introduction of the tax reforms on retirement funds has resulted in the polarization and untruths where people say that government want to take your money. This is not true. We were part of the process in Netherlands, where we sat down with government, with business. We will explain to people, your property fund, nobody's going to take it. It's not even going to affect it. It's only going forward that the taxation is going to be difficult. I must say, I'm very disappointed in my Labour colleagues. You know, it's not nice that you want to go and you want to tell the president this and that and that. It's not nice. You must have respect. This is the respect that we are talking about. You know, but every time, any minute when the TV camera falls on you, you want to be the nastiest person in the whole South Africa. Government and media and business have a joint responsibility to speak the truth and to be honest to our members. The reforms will not affect the historical values of provident funds, because Medusa have ensured that the vested interests and the rights of workers are protected. That is what we are doing. Inclusive communities, the program directors gave their final warning. Research have established that countries with weak public institutions are ethnically and economically divided societies that did not respond well to economic shocks than those with high quality institutions like South Africa and more equal societies. We believe that this economic crisis that we face and the serious headwinds that is facing our country, those headwinds can be defeated if we stand together, if we respect one another, and if we unite as a nation. Viva Medusa, viva. Viva South Africa, viva. Forward to social cohesion, forward.
Mr. Dennis George, comrade, thank you for the presentation there. We're going to break for lunch, but a couple of announcements, ladies and gentlemen. My media colleagues, the minister is going to be available for once-off interview. When we break for lunch, he's going to be in the media room at the back there, so please join the minister there, all of the media. He will be doing a joint press conference with everyone there, so he won't be giving separate interviews. That is one. Number two, the ministers who are here accompanying Minister Nathi Mthethwa and the other colleagues who are accompanying him, as well as the panelists who presented here, please join Minister and colleagues in the holding room. You've been there, it's down the passage, or you'll be directed to that. Number two announcement, those 60 and above, and the living legends, and traditional leaders, remain on this floor where the food is going to be served, where lunch is going to be served. Right? And John Span, the ones who are younger than 60, like myself, go downstairs because you can afford to go up and down. Are we together? So the panelists and the colleagues of the minister in the holding room, our elders, living legends, you remain here so that you don't have to be bothered going up and down. And these young South Africans need a bit of exercise, so they'll go downstairs. And that's where lunch is going to be served. And let's be back here, what time? Let's attempt to be back here at 2 because the next session belongs to all of us, right? So we would like to take inputs from the floor at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.